I'm on the clock in 12 slow drafts right now. We'll make those picks today. We're going to talk about upside. We're also going to talk about plans for the next wave of slow drafts as these ones start to wind down. This is Stealing Signals. Let's go. What's up, guys? Bindles, Ashton. Is that Cincinnati 2013? GM to all you guys in the chat. Welcome in. I forgot to tweet this out. I'm gonna go tweet it out. CLN 2013. GM. T. Peter, all you guys who had the notifications on are here. You guys get to hear me type some stuff while I fire off a tweet because I forgot to do that before I started. Apologize for the not very fun opening with a bunch of typing and not jumping right into the picks or anything. But I am going to jump in right now because we were in like 20 slows together last year. I apologize that I don't remember that. I don't think that's what you're saying. Liam's running late on his stream. Oh, he's streaming right now. Gotcha. Yeah, got the haircut today. Everyone always is like, yeah, you got to show your hair more. So I was like, all right, fine. I'll do the hair today. Glad you enjoyed the drafts with Sean. A few of those over on Stealing Bananas. Those are fun ones. Yeah. Welcome in. We're going to jump into some of these drafts. We're going to spin the wheel. We're winding down. I guess let's talk. Well, no, let's make some picks. Let's jump in this Chihuahua. Let's make a few picks. I like to get started hot and fast and get it going. Don't quote me on that. Here we go. First team we're jumping into. It's a Tyreek Hill out of the 104 team. You know I like that. Right now it's a 2-3-6-2. Brock Purdy and Tua. One thing that I'm recognizing with a lot of these as we go, and we talked about this a little bit on Ship Chasing last night with Leone, about the stacks and the bringbacks and the teams that have all that stuff covered, advance at a higher rate, and we talked about how some of that is a little bit just about those people are better drafters and things like that. One of the things that it's funny because I'm slow drafting. You'd think I'd be able to get through all of the stacks and the bringbacks and everything a little bit more effectively. But one of the things I'm coming to realize with these as we kind of head toward the late rounds is I don't have I have the stacks, but I don't have the bringbacks and some of that stuff that I want. Now, to be fair, all these slows started before the schedule was even released, and then I didn't have like the buys and stuff in the app for like an extra week or two after that. Some of this stuff has been slow, and I was just getting used to the week 17 matchups, all of that stuff, right? So some of these is like a slow draft, element. But as I get into my next wave and everything, I do know that I want to try to do a better job of, game stacking week 17, getting the bringbacks into the equation. Like here's one where I took Purdy on a Kittle team, but I don't have a Detroit bringback, and that's not that hard to get in there. I mean, I didn't take a whole lot of Jameson Williams. This is one where I could have fit in Jameson Williams probably, if not like a David Montgomery pick. There's a lot of different ways you can get into Detroit. Obviously, some of their high-profile players are really expensive, but same deal with Miami, it looks like. I have Tua and Tyreek, but I don't see a Cleveland player here where I think I could have made that work as well. You still can really late with like an Elijah Moore or things like that, but it's something I want to be working on more in my future drafts, and some of these ones that are winding down, I'm noticing I'm not getting the bringbacks. I'm not getting the week 17 stacks as much as I would like. You guys have asked me about this in the last week, 2 weeks as we've been doing these streams, and it is something where there's going to be things that I'm going to be picking up on as I get back in the swing of things. I'm not doing a ton of drafting and don't have a ton of years of drafting under my belt. I'm a little bit behind on some of that kind of stuff, a little bit more of a novice in those regards than, some of my other streaming counterparts like the Pats and the Petes of the world. But no, this is a fun team. It's a Brock Purdy, Tua Tagovailoa team. Jalen Warren, Trey Benson, Marshawn Lloyd. I love those 3 running backs. Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Malik Neighbors, Tank Dell, JSN. I just took Darnell Mooney with my last pick. I haven't taken a lot of him, but we've talked about the Atlanta situation, bringing over the Rams offensive coordinator or pass game coordinator from last year, Zach Robinson, to be their offensive coordinator, and how that probably leads to a lot of 11 personnel usage. Darnell Mooney gets a free agent contract from them. He struggled a little bit in the last couple of years within Chicago, but maybe not a great fit for, the Justin Fields offense the last couple of years. Maybe they get a little more out of him in Atlanta. I do know that he's going to run a lot of routes, or I expect that he's going to run a lot of routes, just, based on the way that I expect their offense to run and operate. And so I realized when I made this pick that there's not a lot of wide receivers with ADPs around this 150 range where Mooney goes that I feel great about. There's some rookies that you can go get for sure, and some rookies went right behind him. Quentin Johnston went 1 pick ahead of him. He's got a similar ADP. Jalen Polk is a rookie that I'm not really super in on at that price. Ricky Pearsall goes in that range. Another rookie that I'm not super in on, Jermaine Burton right behind that range. I'm more willing to take Burton. I probably want to take him at a little bit of a discount because I understand why like Polk and Pearsall go ahead due to just pure draft capital. Malachi Corley goes a little bit behind there, but he went higher in this draft. Roman Wilson, who I've taken a couple times as well. Is Thielen in this range? He's a little bit behind this range. But yeah, when I was looking at the receivers there, I was like, man, that's a tricky spot for wide receiver. I think I kind of like Darnell Mooney in that pocket, just as a guy that I feel confident will run a lot of routes and has some real potential. And he's a way to get into the Atlanta offense, which I've talked about really wanting to play for a number of reasons. They play in a dome, really easy schedule, a lot of reasons to be in on Atlanta to take a step forward this year offensively. This is a team where I didn't have any other Falcons. I didn't take Drake Leonard or Kyle Pitts or Bijan Robinson on this team. So Mooney made a lot of sense as my wide receiver 6. Feel good about that. And back up, I have the 2 quarterbacks. Another thing I've been coming around on considering more as I get towards the ends of these builds is probably a little bit more of the 3 quarterback stuff than I was initially thinking. I think in the early shows, we talked a little bit about that stuff, and I was a little bit maybe too heavy on 2 quarterback builds, especially because I'm doing a lot of 2 elite tight end stuff where I can pretty comfortably stop after 2 tight ends. And I think, I like to get deeper at running back than like Pete, for example. In a lot of his drafts, I know goes 5 running backs. With the half PPR, I do like to get to 6 usually, and I'm doing a lot of 0 RB, and that's part of it as well. I don't think you have to. I don't think it's wrong to do 5 or anything. I just like that extra depth there. I want the extra depth at receiver, so I've been trying to do 2 quarterback, 2 tight end builds. I do feel like I'm going to be doing more 3 quarterback builds as we go. I want to get into more like Bo Nix, especially is like, I think he probably needs to be part of a 3 quarterback build, but he's just too easy to take as late as he goes. I feel like he's more likely to start 17 games than JJ McCarthy or Drake May, who both go ahead of him. I think to describe that take, I would say, I think it's because of play style that I wrote about this when I wrote about the fit with the Broncos recently in my most recent post over at the newsletter, where I talked about perfect storm candidates for this year. And I was talking about Bo Nix's fit with the Broncos and the Sean Payton system, that even in college, he didn't have a lot of big time throws over at PFF, but he also didn't have a lot of turnover worthy plays. Essentially just didn't take a lot of shots. you could kind of criticize him for that potentially, but he was so efficient. He went underneath with the more conservative throws, the lower ADOT throws, but really, really efficient on those. And so you're getting the chain moving and the high percentage decisions. That kind of stuff is what Sean Payton likes, and I think he'll get it from Bo Nix, and I think that helps Bo Nix stay in the starting job, that he's not going to be making a lot of these big mistakes. Contrast that with like one of the reasons our buddy Pat Grant has talked so favorably about Drake May. He's going to offer some mobility, and he's going to throw downfield. He's going to take shots. He's going to, but that type of play style can lead to interceptions. It can lead to bad games. It can potentially lead to benchings. I don't think it's going to necessarily be the case for Drake May, but there's the question of whether he even starts week 1 as well, where I think Nix has a better shot to start week 1. You got Jacoby Brissett there. You got Gerard Mayo taking over as the head coach. He played with Jacoby Brissett in Brissett's first stint in New England. Wouldn't surprise me if Brissett starts week 1. Wouldn't surprise me if Sam Darnold starts week 1 in Minnesota. And Nix goes so late, and I think it's just like a really good fit for that offense. So he's one that, as far as late round QBs go, is like the easiest one. I want to start doing some 3 QB builds. I know Sean likes to factor in some Justin Fields late. I do want to get into some Drake May, which I haven't been taking a lot of him because I have some concerns about games played, but at his cost, if you're doing a 3 QB build, definitely makes sense. Maybe a little bit more Bryce Young as a maybe year 2 bounce back candidate type. Daniel Jones, I have taken a decent amount of and been really excited about on the stream, but Pat told me on Ship Chasing yesterday, or we talked through it on Ship Chasing yesterday, that he's got these pretty massive $20+ million of injury clauses in his contract, where if the Giants aren't having a good year late in the year, they probably don't play him through week 17. And so was frustrating to find out, because I've been taking a lot of Daniel Jones, hard to ignore the injury guarantee stuff that does seem to lead to guys getting benched late in the year. But there are some late round QBs that are definitely worth building around and doing some of the, not building around, but you can do some of the 3 QB stuff with. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. By the way, go like and subscribe, like the video, subscribe to the channel. The channel went over 950 subs as of not long before going live here. I think it was at like 951, which was really cool to see on that path to 1,000. Only need fewer than 50 more subscribers to get 1,000. Appreciate all you guys that have clicked the subscription button and have jumped on to watch these streams. It's been awesome. All right, let's make this pick. I like the 6 receivers. I like the 2 tight ends, obviously, with Kincaid and Kittle. I really like the 3 running backs. This is a pretty fun team. Again, if it was just a little bit better correlated. This is a good question. What are we doing to celebrate 1,000? I was trying to think of something. I mean, I'm happy to do like giveaways, give away a free sub to the newsletter or something. I got to figure out how to do that, like how to get names into a drawing, spin a wheel, maybe something like that. There's got to be something fun, but it also hasn't been like a long time coming. It's not like we've all been waiting forever to get to 1,000. It's been a few shows over a couple weeks, and you guys have been incredible with all the support. Really appreciate it. Let's make this pick though. 2, 3, 6, 2 probably leans toward the running back position here. And really, Kamani Vidal is somebody I'm taking a ton of, and he's sort of the last of a tier at running back. He's the ADP value. He has slid 6 picks past ADP. The other running backs behind him, Jaleel McLaughlin, Chuba Hubbard, not in that same group for me. Bucky Irving is in that same group, and he comes in even later, but you can get him later. Wide receiver, top one is Marvin Mims, which I'm starting to come around on that case. There's been some more positive quotes, and I'm starting to buy in a little bit. Corain brought up that point as well, that I think it was maybe last week, Ship Chasing, but before they drafted Troy Franklin, who has been sort of my concern for Mims, they did trade Jerry Jeudy and talk about doing it almost specifically to open up Marvin Mims. Sean Payton said, well, Marvin Mims plays the same position as Jerry Jeudy, and that's why he didn't play a lot last year. And so we traded Jerry Jeudy. And Troy Franklin was a day 3 pick. So maybe I'm overstating. I think Mims should be going ahead of Franklin. Franklin's going a little bit ahead of Mims. He's off the board on this one. I could take Mims here. I don't really need to. I don't have any Cincinnati guys on this team. I already have 6 receivers. I feel really good about the 6 receivers. This is one where I went 4 straight receivers to start. Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Malik Neighbors, Tank Dell is a really, really strong 4. And then I get JSN, who I really like as a 5. This was a fun draft where I got Tank a little bit later in the 4th round. And I got Kincaid to come back in the 5th. So it just is a strong build so far. So anyway, this is a Vidal pick for me. I'm going to add to the running back room, Bucky Irving, Marvin Mims, 2 guys I'm going to star if they come back around this turn, probably on the stream. I want to remember, some guys that I'm considering when that draft comes back around. But yeah, I'm trying to, I need to think through the week 17 matchups with that stuff too, because I'm trying to do a better job with that as we get, deeper into these, to think through the correlations. Like Tampa Bay plays Carolina. I don't have Carolina on that roster. I don't have Cincinnati. Neither of those guys correlate well. Neither does Vidal, frankly. And I am concentrated on a lot of these picks, and that's part of the reason I'm not correlating as well. Some of you guys have pointed that out, that I'm leaning into the same picks repeatedly. So something I need to consider, if I want to get these things correlated better, how am I going to do that? Couple comments in the chat. Question on the marathon format theory. Does it make more sense at running back to only draft 4 to 6 running backs total, 2 to 3 starters with 2 to 3 very clear direct handcuffs? I assume that means the handcuffs to those starters. So you're trying to capture all of the running back value from those individual offenses. I would say the answer to that question for me would be a no. One of the issues with this type of thing with the handcuffs is just like, to put it bluntly, is like other backs can factor in too. Like, even if it's a very clear handcuff in the offseason, and it's only May, it's going to be June, here tomorrow. But even in June, the guys that seem like very clear direct handcuffs, number one, if there's an injury to a starter, the backup isn't guaranteed to stay healthy, right? So it's a very thin outcome where you get enough production out of the starter that he was a worthwhile pick, but he also misses time. And then you have the backup right, and he's the one that is the one that benefits and does really well for a period of time. But he also stays healthy during that time. Maybe the starter comes back. It's just those 2. There are backfields where there's like a split, and the 2 are the only 2, like Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, and a couple of the more recent Packers seasons that's played out that way. But a lot of times you don't even get enough production. Like Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, that was never like a smash in fantasy. It's a tricky thing. And then yeah, I guess my other point is sometimes you get both of the guys getting hurt, and that's where these number 3s come out of nowhere that in season-long leagues we're picking up in week 14 and starting in the fantasy playoffs, which happens every year. And so you would be miserable if you drafted 2 running backs in the same team and they both didn't end up being the guy that was producing. I understand, yeah, full season format, you're trying to capture that. I think you still want, because I also think this caps your upside. There's only so much running back production in each offense. I still think you want to be trying to maximize overall scoring. And so the way to do that is to be drafting back handcuffs to or backups to starting running backs that are not on your team, because you need those running backs to get hurt, and then you hit the home run scenario where your early running back is still healthy and your handcuff benefited from an early running back getting hurt, and you have 2 starters instead of 1. That's the upside thing. And when you're in a big best ball tournament this size, you're going to have people that are going to have the combination right. So you're talking about a very conservative strategy that is too conservative. I think when people see these different formats, they get too conservative. I think I wrote about that with the Eliminator stuff. There's some other great Eliminator content out there, and a lot of it really sharp. And some of the stuff that I wrote about, I think probably unnecessarily risky. But I think the difference between my Eliminator content that you'll see, the piece, if you read a lot of different stuff on the Eliminator, is I'm trying to emphasize that you still need to swing for upside. It's not just about emphasizing floor. And it can't just be about that, because I've played in a lot of different Eliminator leagues. I've played in the guillotine leagues, and it's not hard to build a team that stays alive longer than the average, but then also doesn't have enough upside built into it, and then goes out 2/3 of the way into the season when the field starts whittling down and gets stronger, and you're not strong enough to beat a stronger field. You can definitely do some things that will make sure that you don't go out in week 1 or 2, but it's very similar to some of the strategies in season-long and redraft leagues where people consistently make the mistake. And this is what I write about Stealing Signals when I'm not doing best ball content. I'm doing season-long league, which is more my direct lane. People consistently make the mistake, and I did this when I was a young person, of building teams where they're trying to stack a bunch of small wins. And this is one of the upside things that I want to talk about today. So it's a good segue. They're trying to stack a bunch of small wins, and then they build a good enough team that can make their playoffs in their home league, their 12-team home league. They get in the top 6 in the regular season. They make their fantasy playoffs. They probably win a game. They get into the semifinals every year, and then they lose in the semifinals every year. And some of you guys are nodding your head and going, yeah, this is actually kind of how I've been in my home league every year too. And you tell yourself that it's bad luck. And I told myself it was bad luck for the first 12 years that I played fantasy. I consistently made the semifinals, and I didn't win my home league. I started playing really, really young in 1999, and I consistently would finish top 4. I lost in the in the title game a couple times when I made it. I lost in the semis more, 5 times. And the problem was, every time I got to the final 4, I didn't have the team. Sometimes I would just hope that I would get the lucky matchup. And I saw some years that other people got the lucky matchups. I was like, man, I just need to get the lucky matchups in the playoffs where somebody else's player got hurt and everything worked out great for the person that ended up winning. They didn't even have that good of a team. They win the title because they get these lucky matchups. The reality there is that I knew my team wasn't the best team most years. I thought there was a better team out there that I didn't want to get pitted against. And the reason there was always a better team is I was so good at bean counting the, I did finance in college. I was I took accounting classes and stuff. I was a very numbers-based thinker as a child. And I did very well at, and this works in fantasy baseball. I win titles in fantasy baseball with my buddies, but in fantasy football, it doesn't work. I worked really hard at stacking a bunch of small edges and finding a bunch of players that are slightly better than their ADP, and their projected outlook makes them look like these small hits, these little values. And small hits are fine in some cases, but when you just stack a bunch of those, all you're doing, and that's what a lot of people do with these teams. They build these teams that stack a bunch of small hits that are safe picks, and they're going to finish above average, but they're not going to be good enough to win the title. They're going to consistently get you into your playoffs, and then you're going to lose in the semifinals when you have to face one of the other top 4 teams in your league that have the true breakouts and the stars. And that's the stuff that we talk about when we talk about the back-weighted rookie production and the reasons that you would look for late season ceilings or just profiles that have breakout profiles, full season breakout profiles, young players that could be the defining players of the season, even if it isn't back-weighted production, just extreme upside that can also be zeros. And people love to bash on rookie derangement when those rookies bust. But that's how you win at fantasy football, is seeking to make the best team so that even not just you'll make the playoffs, but when you get to that point, you can still beat the other best teams. That's the mindset you need to have, is how do I beat the other best teams? So we start talking about the Eliminator. I think you need to not think about how do you get through the first half of the season. It's how do you get through the second half of the season when it's already whittled down and everyone has really good players and has stayed pretty healthy. How do you continue to advance in those weeks? That requires building a team that actually does get risky from the beginning. It's not about getting through week 5. It's about getting through week 14 and all the buys and everything. Same thing here with this marathon question. It's not about, how do I accumulate the most points in the safest way? This is a very, like Adam Levitan would call this a triple condom strategy. It's like, I'm not trying to dog on you here at all, Tim, but it's worth talking through. Taking 2 or 3 starting running backs and their direct handcuffs as a way to try to capture all of the production from a couple different offenses is a floor-raising strategy. It is not how you beat the other best, highest-scoring teams. And that's what you should be thinking about in the marathon format is, how do I have a team that outscores the other really good teams that are out there? The team that won the regular season $1 million last year had Raheem Mostert and Kyren Williams in the late rounds. I mean, that's the biggest thing that I remember from that team. I can't remember the whole roster, but it was a 0 RB team, and it won because it had monster hits in the late rounds. And there's going to be monster hits in the late rounds every year in fantasy, and there's going to be a team that stacks them, that has both Mostert and Kyren Williams, right? Wouldn't you love to have Mostert and Kyren Williams? The guy scored 21 touchdowns. Raheem Mostert and Kyren Williams, he missed some time, but whenever he was out there, he averaged a massive amount of points. And that's on a 0 RB team where you didn't really spend much capital, but you get that much running back scoring. And then so now, early rounds, you had an elite tight end. You had plenty of wide receiver depth. You probably had an elite QB. I mean, that's the build that scores the most points over the course of the year, or it did last year in the regular season. But that's not about, drafting direct handcuffs and these things. It's about getting the picks so right that they smash, right? It's not correlation. I'm going to do some marathon drafts. The other thing I said is I was going to talk a little bit about my plans on Sunday. This time Sunday, I'll be on a plane, flying down to Phoenix to visit my brother, our cousin that we were really close with growing up. I haven't seen him in a few years, is down visiting him right now. I'm going to jump down there for a couple days, get to see my cousin for the first time in a few years, get to see his family. And then also, I'd probably go golf with my brother and cousin, all that kind of stuff down in Arizona. But then also while I'm there, enter a few more slows because I have finished, I think, 7 of these 45. I'm going to finish more. Those of you who have asked, how do you get into some of the slows that I'm in? I will be entering those next Tuesday before I fly back. I'm going to finish these up while I'm down there and enjoy family time for a couple days, Sunday to Tuesday. I fly back Tuesday morning Pacific time. And so Tuesday morning, I'll be entering a whole bunch of slows, and I'm sure they won't all fill right away. Some of them will be throughout the day Tuesday. You want to get in some drafts with me, that's the best way to do it. I'm going to enter some marathons. I'm going to enter some sprints. I'll be doing some more streams next week that include some new fresh drafts, marathons, sprints, some more BBMs, probably some more eliminators because I've had a lot of fun with those. We'll see. We'll see what all I jump into. But excited to talk more about the marathon format. And just generally speaking, that answer to that question, hopefully I wrap that up all enough. But that's no matter what the format is, that's an important consideration. It's always important to think about. It's still an upside format, right? Like, to win anything, especially any major best ball tournament, you still need to have like the same tenets that apply for upside still do matter, man. You can't win it by chasing like boring profiles all throughout your roster. That doesn't mean you can't draft some small win players. I want to be clear. Like, I'm okay with some small win players, but I have some of the players I have the biggest issue with or think are most undraftable is largely because of this question of small win or big win. Like a guy, I don't want to get into Jake Ferguson too much, but he came up on ship chasing last night. A guy, like, the way that I was trying to describe my issue with Jake Ferguson's price is that I think the top 7 tight ends have such high upside. I think some of the other tight ends that go around Jake Ferguson have real ceiling potential Ferguson, to me, doesn't. He didn't even have a 1.5 yards per out run last year. It was good, but he wasn't great. It was mostly all routes based. His profile looked almost identical to what Dalton Schultz used to do in this offense. Those guys did not have huge full season upside. Some of the other guys on the show were talking about his 1 week spike upside, which is fair in terms of, thinking through the playoff weeks and trying to get that 1 week spike upside. And if you think that Ferguson has, abnormally high 1 week spike upside for a tight end, then I can understand his price, but I don't. I think you can recreate that a little bit later with other tight ends that aren't that much different in profile. And I think what you're really buying for Ferguson is a floor throughout the season of production that comes with being the second target in a passing game. But even as the second target in the passing game last year, didn't earn a high targets per out run, didn't put up huge volume. And in a season where I think the elite tight ends are so important, and I think you need big tight end points to justify an ADP as high as Ferguson's is, I don't understand why he goes so much higher than Dalton Schultz, for example, who went ahead and had the same type of one. I think he had Dalton Schultz's best season in Dallas was a 1.47 yards per out run. Ferguson had a 1.47 yards per out run last year, tied Schultz's best season. And then also Schultz, when he went to Houston, had a 1.47 yards per out run over in his first year in Houston. Now he has a lot more target competition, but he certainly still has the 1 week spike upside. You can't tell me Dalton Schultz can't catch multiple touchdowns in that Houston offense. So you're really paying for more floor. I do think Schultz is not going to earn more targets. You're going to get more consistent weekly targets out of Ferguson, 40 picks higher. And that's a great example of I think Ferguson doesn't fit builds because I think the opportunity cost at running back and wide receiver and QB where you have to draft Ferguson, and I can build Ferguson's profile through Dalton Schultz and through Luke Musgrave or Ben Sinnott or something. Maybe even Noah Fant really late. And I can build it in the aggregate later because I don't think he has top 5 full season upside. Or the top 5's not fair because it's a tight end position sometimes only has 3 really strong scores. But because there are 7 really good profiles, I do think we're going to have 7. I do think we're going to have at least 3 really strong scores this year that are going to be hard to match for somebody with a Ferguson type profile who doesn't earn volume at a high rate. Last year, I couldn't get people to care about him in the 20th round. I couldn't get people to draft this guy, Ferguson. I was writing about him last year as this argument. He could consolidate routes and be a route merchant, if you will, because that's what Dallas has done with tight ends in the past. That's what made Dalton Schultz a thing. And that's a pick you make in the 20th round. It's not a pick that I make in the at an ADP of 80 where he becomes a small win type play. 8.3 half PPR points per game last year. Was tight end 9 in half PPR points per game and had a good year, had 100 plus targets. I don't think he's bad. I would take him if he was going 40 picks later, whereas Dalton Schultz is going. Probably would even mix him in if he was going 20 picks later. We did some comparison to a David Njoku. I might be wrong on David Njoku. But David Njoku was 2 points per game better last year in half PPR. Now, I know that some people were pointing out that a lot of that was with Joe Flacco, some of those things. Okay. My argument was that, Njoku's coming off a career year from yards per out run, some of those other metrics. And I think there's meat on the bone for him, especially with his athleticism and some of those things. I know they brought in some more competition, Jerry Jeudy, et cetera. So I might be wrong on Njoku. That doesn't change the fact that Ferguson, to me, is a small win type pick at a position and at an opportunity cost where I don't think you can afford to be making a small win pick like that. And it's a good example of the type of thing that I think I don't think he's a bad pick. I think you can stack small wins, and I think you could even win with Ferguson on your roster, but it's a type of pick that I don't think you can make in all 18 rounds for sure. And I don't think you can make even more than 4 or 5 of those in a draft. I think 12 or 13 need to have more big win potential for you to actually think about winning these contests. Most of your picks need to have big win potential. That's what upside means. And it really doesn't matter the contest format. Again, whether it's marathon, whether it's anything, you need the ability to smash. Now, in the marathon format, one thing that's fair is you do need early season production. It's not all back weighted. It changes things for rookies who might not play a lot early in the season, My biggest expectation in the marathon is the rookies will be overdrafted. I think some of them already are overdrafted, but a lot of them don't play enough in the first half of their rookie years to even really have usable scores. And then they're good in the back half, and that back-weighted production is really helpful sometimes. And it could still be helpful in the marathon because a lot of your front-weighted production is projections-based, and a lot of those types of starters that are scoring early can fall off. And if you're only drafting the Deontay Johnson types or whatever, like some of those guys are going to get hurt. It wouldn't be a bad thing to have a rookie coming on late to replace that in your wide receiver build, like if you're drafting a Troy Franklin or something late. But a Troy Franklin probably isn't playing a lot in the first half. I mean, maybe not him specifically, but rookies with that type of profile, day 3 profile, are not big-time targets for me in the marathon. It would be more the Darnell Mooney pick that I was just talking about, a guy that I expect to run a lot of routes from week 1 all year long. That's the big change I would make in marathon. But it's not to start... I mean, those aren't thought of as floor plays because they don't have the back-weighted breakout potential like a Darnell Mooney. But you can't only make those floor plays. Maybe I'd mix in a couple more of those types of plays in a marathon format. I would draft a Jake Ferguson in a marathon format, frankly, because of the target floor. I do think it is helpful. I still probably wouldn't draft him at his price, but I think, some of those plays can help a little bit, but still, regardless of format, you do need plenty of ceiling plays. That's the main point that I'm trying to drive home. So yeah, that was something that I wanted to talk about as it related to upside on today's show. I made it a part of the title of today's show. Glad that that kind of naturally came up. It was weighing on my mind a little bit this morning. CLN says he likes finishing running back by around 15, 16, 90% of his drafts. There's some 18-round round 18 running backs that I do really like, actually. We will get into some of those today. Cusco says if Danny Dimes gets injured, it's probably going to be long before the end of the season anyways. The point is not like if he gets injured, it's they don't want him to get injured because then money in his contract becomes guaranteed. So there's an element that they would be more likely to bench him once their season's over and play literally anyone else, just so that they don't get stuck with that if he got hurt. They don't want to expose him to an injury. Tyler, what's up, buddy? Doing good. Glad to see you. We dug into either of the 2 new contests. Any initial thoughts? I just threw out some of those. The other thoughts for the week 15, 16, 17 one, the sprint, very similar to the season-long formats, the high-stakes main event formats. That's how all of those are decided. FFPC, NFFC. They're all the weeks 15, 16, 17 cumulative scoring. I think you focus on instead of week 17 is all that matters, you focus on weeks 15, 16, 17, right? Like you need back-weighted production. You need all of those things. You don't, I was going to say you don't need game stacks for every week. I think with it being cumulative scoring, it's going to be easier to just sort of accidentally run into different game stacks, week 15, 16, 17. If you really want to get into it and dig into the schedule, I'm sure some people are going to be able to find some micro edges by smartly correlating teams that play each other throughout the 3 weeks. Like I remember last year, you had the Broncos and the Chargers and the Bills and the Patriots were 2 week 17 matchups. And then each of them played each other in week 16. So you had like the Broncos playing the Bills, I think, and the Chargers playing the Patriots or whatever it was. And then the next week, those 4 teams played 2 games 2 weeks in a row. Start to find those like matrices of teams that play each other multiple times throughout weeks 15, 16, 17, and then build stacks through those teams. Then you're going to have multiple shootout potential, outcomes. It's a micro edge, but the reality is like, to actually have that hit means then you also have to have multiple games shoot out to where your micro edge, hit. It's more of like it's building in more shots at one game blowing up rather than probably the likelihood of actually hitting on multiple games through those same teams. Because, yeah, I mean, that's just tough. If the same teams played in the most important game in week 15 and, week 17, say, like different combinations of the same teams, that would be sort of rare, I guess, is what I'm saying. It's possible, obviously, but what I'm trying to say is when you build that way, you're more giving yourselves a lot of games, access to a lot of games. But when one of them does hit, there's going to be other people that played that game probably. And so it's not like there will be other people that played that game and have access to completely unrelated games. It's not like you have to have it in a web. I'm saying this in a weird way, but essentially, yeah, just, think about the week 16 and 15 matchups as well. I think it's a big part of it for the sprint. And then back-weighted production is the same. Rookies and that kind of stuff is the same. What do you think of the Estime injury news today? Does that impact the others? It was at least notable for me for Estime, where I took him in at least one late round spot. I think it was one finally after Sean kind of said some favorable stuff about him. We've talked about liking the Broncos backfield. I was worried about Estime because he doesn't catch a ton of passes, and that's the big thing I really love about the Broncos backfield. But after hearing Sean make some positive comments about it on Stealing Bananas in one of our recent recordings, I was like, my response on that recording was like, it would really suck if I had the situation right and didn't have any exposure to Estime. I do probably want to take him on some teams. Took him on at least one, and then I saw that news and I was like, all right, I'm going to not take him until I know that he's healthy, because I already had worries about his pass catching. That's why I'm telling this story that way, is like, I already had personal issues with Estime's profile being the perfect fit. Now he's a little banged up. Just tuned in. Did I miss the first 3 hours of slow picks? No, we've made one pick. We're 40 minutes in, and I've just been talking. Whoops. Ben, my man, what's good? What's up? I'm doing the thing I do sometimes where I look at everybody's comments. I gotta skip ahead a little bit here. Great insight, appreciate it, Tim. Glad to hear that. I wasn't trying to dog you at all, but I'm glad that was helpful for you. How do I balance upside with floor picks? I hope I hit on that a little bit. I think I'm still behind. I would need more clarification on what this question means, because I don't know what floor picks mean for everybody. But the way I was just describing it was like a small win player, because in some cases, like I had a lot of people in the chat last night on Ship Chasing telling me that that Jake Ferguson had ceiling. Somebody was like, he's going to outscore Trey McBride. It's like, well, then I guess you're just like really out on Trey McBride, because like you look at their profiles and their production profiles in college, and then like how they earned volume last year, like targets per out run stuff. Like it's just not close in terms of what type of players they actually are. Like Jake Ferguson, this time last year, people didn't even know he would be the starter. And again, like I'm going to pat myself on the back. I was right to write that if somebody was going to be the dude that consolidated it, his targets per out run profile from the year prior in a small sample suggested he was the dude over Schoonmaker and whoever else. They had another veteran. Can't remember who the other veteran was that people were drafting. But anyway, there's people that think that like Jake Ferguson's line last year and like a projection for him for this year is upside. And that's not how I see him. So, I mean, I'm talking about guys that smash. Like I'm talking about outlier production when I talk about upside. And you're not going to hit that with every upside swing, right? But like Raheem Mostert scored 21 touchdowns from a late round running back spot last year as an older back. Like that's upside. That's what I'm talking about. League winning upside. So that's the goal. And there are guys that I think you can be like, I don't know how this profile gets there. And so taking him feels like a small win play. And then I tend to actively avoid those picks. Scheduling vacations based on when Underdog opens new contests. Historical anomalies has found me out. I was tracking the price on these flights. My family's not going. My kids have school. My brother's kids are already out of school, as are my cousins. But up here in Washington, they're still in school till the end of June. I was tracking the price on the flights. It was really cheap. I'm flying out of one airport, like a smaller airport in the Seattle area, back into a different one. People are having to shuttle me around. I'm flying into two different airports down in Arizona, but I was able to get really cheap flights, $100 both, like one way, both flights. My point is, I just booked this like 2 days ago. I actually did schedule, not necessarily based on when Underdog was opening a new contest, but based on when I needed to enter some more slows and all of those things. I was tracking it, and it did play a big role. Utah Sports said, good strategy takes. Remember, you don't have to be perfect. The BBM winner missed on Watson and Madison. Completely agree with this, too. This is why you can take upside swings and players can be misses, right? Like, regardless of who the BBM winner missed on, and Madison is like a total floor play, in my opinion, or was last year. Like a great example of that, or small win play, big miss play, and he was a big miss. Total dead zone back, what have you. Regardless of how he missed, when I build teams, I want my misses to be because I was swinging for ceiling. And then, yeah, you can overcome misses. I don't think misses can't exist. That's an argument in my mind for taking more swings at upside. The most reason people don't want to take swings at upside is because they don't have a stable enough floor. If they have a stable floor and upside, that's priced in. They go in the top 3 rounds. Those are the good players. Like, we can't get more than 3 of them in the top 3 rounds, right? Like, that's not how that works. It's all price related. So you don't have to be perfect. But that's why you take swings on profiles that can be big hits, even if they have floor outcomes that are scary. JSN is going in the range where Alexander Madison went last year. Like, you can still take a wide receiver there that had an incredible profile, went in the first round, had a tough first year, and all anybody who loves to play for small wins will tell you is he wasn't good enough as a rookie, and so he has a terrible floor. He could just be a bust. And I don't care. Like, I mean, he could be a bust. I could still win BBM with a bust out of that spot, right? The BBM winner last year had Alexander Madison in that spot. I'm not going to be right on every pick. Neither is the BBM winner. They're not going to be right on every pick. That's not how this works. People try to be way too exact and try to be right on every single pick. It doesn't happen. You cannot do it. Play more fantasy football. You'll learn that lesson. And once you start being okay with the fact that you are going to miss, you start being less concerned about the floor, about the scary elements of a JSN's profile, and you start seeing him at that price and going, well, what if last year really was just some, questionable usage? It was frustrating for me too, man. I had JSN on a ton of teams last year. It sucked. I thought he was going to break out at multiple points. He never really did. I thought it was just a broken hand early and never really happened after that. But they have a whole new offense this year. Tyler Lockett's a year older, agreed to a restructured deal that really did cut down his salary and change things. It was, like, you're going to get cut if you don't restructure, and he did. He had a huge cap number coming into 2024, so it was either a restructure or a cut. But he's older. He's 32 now. I mean, what if JSN is the prospect we thought he was, but the broken hand and the offensive coordinator last year were the issues? You definitely want to be taking him at cost then. Full stop. No questions. We're done. Like, that's upside. Don't worry about the floor. You can't draft. I mean, part of the other element is, I said don't worry about the floor. I do want to caveat that. You can't draft guys that have floors of 0 and stack them all together. We do know Jason's going to run a lot of routes. He's going to get a lot of opportunities. He's still a year 2 guy that they just, their current GM, it's still the same GM, John Schneider, drafted in the first round. They want, teams have investment in players and they want to see them succeed. He's going to run routes. He's going to get opportunity. He's not going to be a 0. So, like, there is, like, floor there. Can't just stack guys that can be complete zeros because you're seeking pure upside. That is a lesson I've had to learn. That's why I draft, Darnell Mooney sometimes in best ball. But it is important stuff. How well do you think we can estimate upside? From Neil Farley here. I think many overstate their ability to do so. Unfair to pick a couple outliers, but how many people thought Thielen Renfrow had huge late round upside? Great question. I don't think Adam Thielen or Hunter Renfrow actually were huge late round upside players. No. I mean, like, even after the fact, like, Hunter Renfrow's good season is overstated. This is like a real take. But no, you're right. I was wrong about Kyron Williams. I didn't think he had upside because he wasn't athletic enough. Like, there's other examples. And Adam Thielen caught a ton of balls last year. He was obviously a hit. He was an upside guy. Renfrow, if you would have said Thielen, Kyler, I wouldn't have been making this point. But I hear your point. My answer would be that yes, many people overstate their ability to do so. I think it's easier than the implication of this question, I guess, is like a one way to frame it. Essentially, that we are not perfect with any strategy. We're not perfect at estimating floor. NFL seasons are chaos. We're not perfect at estimating usage. We're not perfect at estimating role. There's always misses. So this is a thing that I see and a counter that I see, and I do think there's validity to this. There are players that show upside every year that I have to write about in Stealing Signals and be like, I just completely missed. I thought this player sucked. I didn't think this guy had any chance to do this. And I was wrong. At the same time, like, most of the guys who have, like, ever since I've been playing Seeking Upside, most of the guys who have the breakout elite upside seasons, I have exposure to. So I don't think it's that hard. Like, these questions do come up a lot. Again, I'm not attacking Neil either. They come up a lot. It's an important question. The way I would describe it is I will miss on some, and that does happen, but that there's like a spoilage rate in every strategy in fantasy football. We're not perfect about any of it. It doesn't discount trying to seek that. That would be my personal experience and my response to a good question. That you could disagree with that response 100%. I started to scroll through some comments, and then I got myself stuck on comments. So I'm going to fire ahead, but as I fired ahead, I'm I don't even know what the chat is happening. Well, what's going on in the chat? Let's go back to this turn that I'm at, a draft that we're in, 2-3-6-2. It's at the turn 14-15. I'm at the 14-12. I have two Arizona guys starred, Zay Jones and Michael Williams. Wilson. Don't draft either of them. The reason I have them starred is this is a Kyler Wilson 18 pick after Kyler Murray. Sorry, guys. It's pollen count is high here. I've written about I have really bad allergies. I'm allergenic right now, a little bit harebrained. Kyler Murray, I drafted on this team, 18 picks after ADP, did not have Trey McBride on this team. It's a Dalton Kincaid, Brock Bowers at tight end for those who aren't seeing the visual, maybe listening on the audio. So I immediately starred, and I didn't have Harrison. And so I immediately starred Zay Jones and Michael Wilson, was like, I'll backstack him later. This looks like it's going to be a Michael Wilson pick. It's a 2-3-6-2. I'm at the 168, 169 picks. Michael Wilson's ADP is 174. He's the second wide receiver by ADP. I have not drafted Michael Wilson yet. I put Zay Jones ahead of Michael Wilson in the queue. He goes later, but I'm such a skeptic about Michael Wilson that I was like, yeah, I'll probably just wait until Zay Jones, but I can't really pass this up. 5 picks before ADP to make the stack that I have to have. I could also take Zay Jones on the next turn. If he makes it to 192, 193, he's at a 189. I'm not going to take Zay Jones this far ahead of ADP. And so I have to take Wilson here because Zay Jones could go before my next picks. So at this point, Gretch has 0 teams left without 2 tight ends. Ben says in the chat. That's a great point, but I did just find one. There's one floating around out of the 45. I think 7 of my 45 are done. Of the other 38, there's one floating around that still only had McBride, and I didn't take a tight end, and I was really late. I starred Noah Fant. Noah Fant's my backdoor late tight end. I think I also started Juwan Johnson because you guys have been getting the chat. You guys have gotten me a little bit more interested in Juwan Johnson over the last week. I think I started him as a potential late round tight end. So anyway, Michael Wilson is going to come off the board here to me. This team is Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrence, Christian McCaffrey. So I only have 3 running backs, very late, but I do have McCaffrey. Zach Charbonnet and Marshawn Lloyd is a pretty good 2 and 3. Mike Evans, that's an interesting pick for me. Very rarely make the Evans pick. Stephon Diggs, Christian Kirk, JSN, Rashee Rice, Jacoby Myers, Kincaid and Brock Bowers. So I have 2 bets on the Raiders passing game, even though I probably won't stack it. I'm stacking it directionally, right? Like whether it's Minshew or O'Connell or a combination, I'm stacking it toward pass volume in this offense. I should be looking at bringbacks for them from New Orleans. I don't have them. Would have been nice to take Kendre Miller maybe over Marshawn Lloyd. Arizona bringbacks are the Rams. Don't have those. So this is where, I keep running into this stuff at this stage, getting a little frustrated with myself for not have baked in more of that. Demarcus Robinson is my late round Ram that I like. Again, concentration in these McVay offenses, 11 personnel. They really like him for run blocking. That's why he took over in 3 receiver sets over Tutu Atwell mid-season last year. Then they signed him to $4 million in the offseason. Just a 1-year deal, but gave him some money. $4 million for a guy who's been kind of a journeyman. I expect that he will be maybe, if not all season, definitely involved in the 11 personnel early. By the way, they got what they wanted out of him. Not only did he provide them some run blocking, and their offense got better, even though like Tutu was a more productive player. The Rams end up making the playoffs, and then they end up winning or losing that playoff game to the Lions, but a very close game. Down the stretch, after their bye, they won 7 of their final 8 games. They went from 3-6 to 10-7 to make the playoffs. That's when they made that change. That's when Demarcus Robinson started playing, and it opened up their run game down the stretch. Demarcus Robinson, very underrated late round, boring pick. He doesn't have ceiling. But this is the type of spot where in best ball, you do have to sometimes prioritize role and like non-zero. So one of the big points that Leone made on our ship chasing stream yesterday was that the biggest thing, if you could have anything between now and week 17, the biggest thing to walk into 17 with is active players. The more active players you have, and he defined that as players not scoring 0 in a given week, the better your chance was. And it was exponential. If you had all 18 guys weren't injured and they were out there for you, your team was great. And the point I made on the show that the guys were in agreement with was that doesn't just mean injury, right? It also means don't draft players that could get benched or are not going to be used or otherwise are not getting are getting a 0. Maybe they get cut, whatever. Demarcus Robinson to me is a little bit of a risk to get all the way to week 17. But he closed. So first of all, they were a lot better offensively, like I was just saying. And then he also closed the year with 5+ targets, including their wild card game in 5 of their 6 games. He caught 3+ balls in all of those. He had 40+ receiving yards in all 6. He scored touchdowns in 4 of them. Like he was catching some passes and putting up a little bit of production, and in half PPR because of those touchdowns, he had 12+ half PPR points in 5 straight games from week 13 to week 17. He was a strong, like high floor play. There's a consistency to running that many routes that you're going to get, some targets and you're going to be able to produce some. So anyway, I mean, as soon as he gets expensive, I won't draft him anymore. But at ADP 190, he's my favorite late round Ram. And so I'm starring him as a bring back on the Arizona thing for the next turn as an option if he gets back, which means I have a couple wide receivers I might want to take at the next turn. I'm going to take Michael Wilson at this turn as my 7th wide receiver. I still only have 3 running backs. I think the other thing I need to do at this turn just to balance structurally is to get another wide receiver here. Another running back here. Trevor Lawrence is my other QB I have stacked with Christian Kirk. I don't have a Tennessee bring back. I was just saying Demarcus Robinson is my favorite late round Ram. You guys are going to hate this, but there was some positive commentary out of Titans camp about Traylon Burks the other day, so he's now my favorite. I have not taken him yet, and he is probably not drafted in many of these, but that's actually a little bit of a virtue possibly. And there's like some outs also to him, like getting traded or something. It's like really crowded in Tennessee with they brought in Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd alongside DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah, it was Calvin Ridley who said this. Not a bandwagoner points it out. Said he's like Julio and AJ Brown. He's like, he's so big and so fast. You don't have to worry about him. He's going to be productive. Calvin Ridley's been on the practice field with him for like a couple days, and he's like, this guy's incredible. And then I went back to his yards per out run profile. Last year he was terrible, but he was also banged up a lot, and his ADOT rose a ton. So he was in this like deep threat role where his ADOT. Let's do this. Let's do the, pull up the yards per out run document and like give you guys the visual. Here's Traylon Burks' 2 seasons. Can you guys see this? Yeah, I think so. Here's his 2 seasons. Year 1, 2022 was not bad. 1.75 yards per out run is not bad. He missed some time, banged up. 20.9% targets per out run at a 12.4 ADOT. Pretty solid 0.56 weighted targets per out run. This is fine volume earning. 8.4 yards per target is fine. 1.75 yards per out run. For a young rookie, this is why people were still in on Traylon Burks last year, even though he was banged up as a rookie and not very good. He was a 22-year-old rookie, not super young. He's already actually turned 24 this offseason. Last year, he's age 23. He was even more banged up, but got put into this deep threat role with where he had a 17.7 ADOT, and his targets per out run falls to 10.9. This is horrible volume earning, but I'm wondering if it's just that he was a little bit pigeonholed because he was hurt. They put him in this deep threat role and kind of use him as a decoy. His yards per out run completely craters. He's horrible last year. But I mean, I can at least look at year 1 and say like, and then the prospect profile was strong and say like, okay, maybe if it makes sense in a build and I want to get a bring back on a Jacksonville stack. The chat says, if Traylon Burks is who you need, I'm doomed. The team is telling you they hate him with the signings of Ridley and Boyd. And this was the big one. He got knocked for a ton. Burks in college was all quick screenplay. That's what he is good at. I'll just unstar him for now. I don't need to. We're still in May. We don't need to do Traylon Burks yet. If I wanted to do a late round bring back on a Jacksonville stack, I would do him before I would do Tyler Boyd. I'll tell you that. I do like Boyd as a player, but he's just gotten so old. So this pick for me is going to be Michael Wilson. And I got to go running back here. And the running back's Bucky Irving. Of these options, take a lot of Bucky Irving, but he's mispriced by a lot. All right. That draft, I left open the ability to go wide receiver at the next turn as well. Zay Jones, Demarcus Robinson, 2 options. Traylon Burks, not an option. The chat will never let me live that down. That's fair. 3, 2, 7, 2. So we talk about how my favorite build is the 2-2-6-2. I've taken it to the extreme here. I've already taken 3 quarterbacks and only 2 running backs, 7 receivers. This is a Purdy, Cousins, Deshaun Watson build. And the question is why? Why did I draft Deshaun Watson 7 picks ahead of ADP at the last turn? I got Ray Davis as my 2nd running back. Jalen Wright was already off the board. I imagine Kamani Vidal was. He must have went really early. Yeah, he went at 11-11 in this one. It's kind of coming back to me that Ray Davis was the last of a tier, and there was no other running back I really wanted to take there, but all I had was Jaylen Warren. So this is a Brock Purdy, Kirk Cousins, Deshaun Watson. My only running backs right now are Jaylen Warren and Ray Davis. Wide receiver is A.J. Brown, Drake London, DK Metcalf, Cooper Kupp, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, Dontavian Wicks. Tight end is Kittle and Njoku. I don't even have a bring back on Cleveland. I do have Njoku to go with Watson. I have Cousins single stacked with London with no bring back. I have Purdy single stacked with Kittle with no bring back. I think it's because I didn't have any week 17 bring backs, and I was just like, I'm starting to, I mentioned this early in the stream, I'm starting to consider this idea of the 3 QBs. Pete's been doing it in a lot of his drafts. And we know that the research from last year actually showed this. And I'm remembering that I did a lot of 3 QB builds last year, and I thought that was right. And I had some success with it, although most of that was really late. I was taking a lot of like Sam Howell and Kenny Pickett, which didn't work. But I really liked this idea of 3 stacked quarterbacks. If you're going to go 3, they all need to be stacked. And I don't have bringbacks and big game stacks on either of Purdy or Cousins, and didn't have ways to get there necessarily, especially with Purdy, because like Detroit, when you miss your opportunity to draft a Detroit player, there's not a lot late. So I think I threw Watson on here because I didn't like the running backs available. I felt like I could be done at 7 receivers, and so and I am done at 2 tight ends, and so this can be a 3-6-7-2 where I just go 4 running backs out the gate the rest of the way, and I have 3 stacked quarterbacks, single stacked without bringbacks. It's not sexy. Bucky Irving goes before I get back up. Tyrone Tracy goes before I get back up. Because I'm at the turn here, this was a really risky move. Like, I guess I thought I could send some of these running backs back to me. Irving goes right at his ADP of 175. Tracy goes ahead of his 180 ADP. I'm picking at 180. Maybe I thought I could get, one of Tyrone Tracy or Bucky Irving back to me. I wonder if I had starred anybody for any reason, but we're back up, and I don't have any of that working in my favor. Which does beg the question now if I would take both Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson together. And I think that's what I'm going to do here. Because it's not hard to bet against DeAndre Swift's health. Last year he played 16 games. It was his first season of more than 13. He was always banged up with the Lions and missing at least a little bit of time. He played 14 in 2022. But yeah, games played by year 13, 13, 14. He played 16 last year. The one he missed was week 18. They sat him out intentionally. But so he stayed healthy last year, but has not been the picture of health in his career. And I like this offense, and I think both Herbert and Roschon. Yeah, I mean, Ross makes a point. What if Khalil gets traded? I mean, I do think it's possible one of these backups gets moved. But this is a good offense to get into. I have DK Metcalf as well. So I got a little bit of a week 17 mini correlation if I go Chicago. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take both Chicago guys because I also think it's kind of a floor pick from similar to back to our conversations earlier when we talked about the marathon, 2 backs from the same team. I feel confident these guys are the RB2 and RB3. So if something doesn't happen to Swift, I feel confident that one of these guys is going to produce, and both of their upside cases are sort of correlated. A Swift injury would make both of them values at 180 and 181. If Swift wasn't there, they would both be going higher, right? We wouldn't necessarily know the split, but they'd both be going higher. And so it's a correlated play. And I think one of them plays off of Swift in some regard. So I also think I'm getting some floor, some standalone value, even if Swift's healthy, because Swift's not going to get every touch. And this team needs that. It's all it has is Jaylen Warren and Ray Davis. I think the only reason Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson go so late, because this is a good offense. They're going to score touchdowns. Their receivers are incredible. The only reason they go so late is no one knows which of them to take, and I don't either. I don't have a strong take on it. I like them both. Herbert's the better rusher than even Swift. He's the best pure rusher on the team, and in half PPR, like that can be big. And I want to take him for that reason. Like if Swift goes down, he gets most of those touches. But Roschon's big, might actually get the goal line work right away if DeAndre Swift doesn't. Like, and that's what some people seem to think DeAndre Swift's not going to. Well, if it's not him, I think it's maybe Roschon. And Roschon's also the really good pass protector and the better like fit on pass downs. So if Swift went out, Roschon feels like the more direct. Like I think Herbert has a role alongside Swift. Swift's the pass down, maybe green zone, high value touch guy. Herbert's getting the low value touches, the rush attempts, and that's probably the way that it is. But then if Swift misses time, that Roschon steps into the Swift work and plays on pass downs and gets the goal line work and suddenly has more value than Herbert because he's getting all the high value touches. That's probably the way I would handicap it if you made me. But like Herbert's still getting more work if Swift goes down. Like it's good for him too. He's probably the truer number 2. That's why his ADP is a little higher. I take more Herbert for that reason because I think he's probably the higher like non-zero. We were just talking about not having zeros in your build, but also trying to seek upside. A little bit of standalone value plus ceiling matters. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know how to handicap those two either, and I think that's why they go so cheap. Bears have no reason to trade depth. This I agree with as well. Nick makes a good point here. Often we want trades to happen more than they actually happen. They're a win-now team. If Swift goes down, they def want both backs still there. I agree. They're built to win in the short term. Yeah, that happens a lot in fantasy where we want trades to happen, but it doesn't make any sense for where the team actually is on their timeline and what they're expecting. It's still like sometimes there's still surprising trades though. So after round 10, who are the players you think are smash upside plays? This is like, I mean, this could be a 5-hour podcast, right? Like this is the whole question, you know? And I think we talk about a lot of those guys. I've talked about a lot of the running backs, a lot of the rookie running backs. I wrote a piece over at Stealing Signals that was like hammer the rookie running backs in all formats. And I think they're still too cheap. Talked about Marshawn Lloyd. We talked about Kendre Miller on the last stream. He's a second-year guy. Bucky Irving a little later. Tyrone Tracy, those guys that seem to have the clear number 2 role, and then they could just be a lot better than what people seem to expect. It really is rookies, you know. You're definitely right. All right, let's jump into some other drafts here. Best Ball Mania draft, an hour on the clock. I do have Tracy at the top of the queue here at pick 170. I took Troy Franklin. Meatwad asks, does Tyrone Tracy have a clear number 2 role? No. But they did just cut Gary Brightwell. Everyone talks about Eric Gray. Eric Gray, like, if you look at Eric Gray's profile, then I think you would argue that's why they drafted Tyrone Tracy, right? Like if you try to make a case for Eric Gray, then the case would be, well, what about Tyrone Tracy? Like, because he's not athletic. He ran a 4.62 40. Traditionally, you get higher than 4.6, and that's a problem. I just pulled up his RAS score, which shout out to @MathBomb on Twitter. If you're not following him for any reason, it's a great place to get the athletic stuff, relative athletic score, RAS. He had good vertical jump and good shuttle and good 10-yard split and some of that stuff. But then you also go look at his college profile. I remember trying to talk myself into Eric Gray last year. His final season, he had some production, but like his first 3 years, he totaled 10 rushing touchdowns, and his yards per carry was never like super strong. And college yards per carries are like sometimes really inflated. He was 5.3, 4.9, 5.3. That's like not great for an NFL prospect running back. Now, I mean, like blocking and all that stuff can matter, but that was across 2 different teams. He played for Tennessee, then he went to Oklahoma. Like his whole profile is just not that good. It's just like a very like do it all but not very well kind of guy, and then Tyrone Tracy's this like really athletic guy that they drafted and used to play receiver, can really catch, and then they changed him over into a running back, and his RAS score is way higher. His athleticism, his 40 time, all of it tests way higher. It just seems like the number 2 to me, but you're right. He's not clear. All right, this team. Here's your one tight end team that I must have drafted Troy Franklin this morning. It was going to time out before the show. Charles thinks 5% drafted Eric Gray is better than 100% drafted Tyrone Tracy. I mean, I'm not drafting 100% Tracy, but I don't know if that means that 100% Tyrone Tracy is going to give you absolutely nothing and 5% Gray gives you more of a chance for something. Seems to be a very negative Tyrone Tracy position either way, however you read that. Yeah, I mean, this is possible. Meatwad's saying it too. A little worried that the community is wish casting Tracy. Again, like you go to the depth chart, they cut Gary Brightwell, who's the other guy that they've actually played a little bit. They have a guy named Jashawn Corbin, who's actually kind of interesting. And it does matter who's like the 4th running back, because sometimes it's somebody that we're not thinking it is at all or even discussing. But right now, it very much looks like it's going to be either Tyrone Tracy or Eric Gray, the 2023 5th rounder or the 2024 5th rounder. And Eric Gray had a hard time earning that role last year, and then they drafted another back this year to add more depth, which suggests they weren't super into Gray. It might have suggested they just weren't super into Brightwell, who they already cut. Gray only got 17 carries last year, 2.8 yards per attempt, caught 6 balls, 23 total touches, uneventful rookie year. Was already 24, turns 25 in November. Was an older prospect. Again, doesn't really have NFL athleticism for a running back. I just don't. Oh, this is it. This is what Charles was saying. Got you. Thank you. Leverage on the field. He's saying, yeah. 100% of drafts. Tracy is drafted in 100% of drafts. Eric Gray is going to be a 5% owned player. That makes sense. That's fair. That's probably right. That Eric Gray is the better pick if he's only drafted in 5% of drafts. But Tracy's not expensive. Was where I'm going with all this. Like Meatwad was saying, like the community's wish casting a little bit. He's 184 ADP right now. I don't think anyone's really wish casting. Like I'm thinking about taking him in the 15th, well ahead of ADP. He's usually a 16th or 17th rounder. So he does go. He goes basically every draft. Bindles nailed it too. Sorry, guys, I missed that. But yeah, even though he goes a lot, just the fact that, what his price is you talk about upside. Like, this is a thin backfield. Devin Singletary is one of the more fragile starters in the league. Not fragile from an injury perspective, fragile from a profile perspective. What if Tyrone Tracy's athleticism translates? What if his late switch to running back is masking the fact that he actually has some skills there that are unknown? Like, would that be the craziest story in the history of sports? No. Is it likely? Probably not. But there are paths to Tyrone Tracy being such a hit that he's actually beating out Devin Singletary by midseason. Eric Gray, yeah, I mean, Utah Sports points it out. He had his chance last year and Barkley was out. He didn't do anything. He didn't earn the role. He's not athletic enough. They went and drafted a new guy. This is one of those, like, you just bet on the rookie upside thing to some degree. Although I do understand the point about leverage on the field, that Eric Gray is maybe the way to play that so affordably and unowned. It could be like, Kylan Williams thing again. But this is my one tight end team. Let's get back to it. Round 15, I starred Noah Fant, Hunter Henry, and Jawan Johnson. This is the exact team I was telling you guys about. Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Brooks, Zach Charbonnet, Marshawn Lloyd. Same running backs I'm drafting in every team. Nico Collins, Malik Neighbors, Keenan Allen, Ladd McConkey, Mike Williams, Joshua Palmer, Troy Franklin added on to the end of there. He's my 7th receiver. Couldn't tell you why I took him. There's no Cincinnati player here. There's no reason to go to Bo Nix when I have both Kyler and Herbert. Trey McBride's the only tight end. I'm probably thinking still a little bit later at tight end, although Hunter Henry's a nice ADP value, and I have Joshua Palmer. Hunter Henry's a bring back on the Herbert stuff. I don't have a New England player. I should be taking Hunter Henry here. He's actually a good ADP value. I should have taken him where I took Troy Franklin. He gets around the turn back to me. He's the second highest guy in ADP. I have a Herbert Palmer stack. They are a week 17 matchup. He does not share a bye with my tight end 1, Trey McBride. We'll leave Tyrone Tracy out there on this one. Henry's the pick that has to be made there, more or less. I don't have... I have Ladd and Josh Palmer. I have a Herbert double stack on this team. Let's go. Getting heavy on Herbert. I have Kyler McBride with no Ram bring back either. So it is... You kidding me? I can't even start DeMarcus Robinson? Oh, he went at the turn. Look at this. He went 14-12. 22 picks ahead of ADP. Oh, man. I can't even start my favorite Rams bring back. I guess this is another Cardinals thing with no bring back. That's what I get. All right. 1-5-7-2 in this one. Only Joe Burrow. This is the one where I took both Zach Moss and Chase Brown behind ADP. I got Moss just slightly behind ADP, and Chase Brown ends up going 4.5 picks behind ADP, and I just couldn't keep letting him fall. Decided because they're both such cheap prices, I would take them both. It's a Burrow-Jamar Chase team that has 2 Bengals running backs. Joe Burrow, Rachaad White. This is one of the few Rachaad White teams for me. 14 picks behind ADP. Not a big fan of his. Zach Moss, Brian Robinson, Chase Brown, Tyrone Tracy, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, Malik Neighbors, Tank Dell, Cortland Sutton. So I do have the bring back from Denver. I didn't get Javonte Williams, would have been probably the preferred for me, but that's all right. Jermaine Burton. So that's my 5th Bengal. I have both Jamar Chase and Jermaine Burton and both the running backs with Joe Burrow. It's a big Cincinnati stack with the Cortland Sutton bring back. Wan'Dale Robinson's the last receiver who I took, so I could potentially take Daniel Jones late. Unfortunately, because of those injury guarantee comments that I learned about last night, I'm way less interested in Daniel Jones late. That's a bummer. I'm up at 189, and there's a couple of QBs, Deshaun Watson and Baker Mayfield, that are both at least 23 picks beyond ADP. Baker, I have Rachaad White on this team, so it's sort of a directional Tampa Bay bet. Jalen McMillan's gone. He has not gone. Jalen McMillan could be a late receiver 8, a wide receiver 8 on a bring back. I don't have a Cleveland player, and I've taken more Watson than I frankly want to. This is going to be a Baker pick as my QB2, where I have Rachaad White. Who does Tampa get? It's Carolina, right? I don't have a Carolina player on this team. But I do have Rachaad White already, sort of a directional bet on the Bucs having another decent year. And I can grab Jalen McMillan on the way back here pretty comfortably at 196. I only have 6 picks until I'm back up. That's still well ahead of his ADP. That would get me to a 2-5-8-2 build before my final pick. I think that's the way I got to play this one, where I don't have that second QB position figured out. It was going to be Daniel Jones when I took Wan'Dale, but I don't really want to do that. The other guy I had in the queue was Bo Nix because I have Sutton. But people always get mad at you when you draft both QBs in the same Week 17 game. I'm not quite sure why, or at least I personally don't seem to mind it. Seems like an easy way to correlate. make 2 team season-long bets, and then you also have bringbacks, whichever quarterback is the good quarterback. I've never really understood that, but I'm obviously missing something there. All right. What else do we got? Let's jump into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We got 8 more. Jump into a puppy. This is at a turn. It's a 2-5-6-2. CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Chase Brown, Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle pick. Not taking a lot of those. I do acknowledge that there's a lot of volume available in the Dallas backfield. And I'm not drafting any of them because I don't want to draft Zeke. Christian McCaffrey, Chase Brown, Rico Dowdle, Bucky Irving, Tyrone Tracy, Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle, Keon Coleman, Chris Godwin, Cortland Sutton, Tyler Lockett. That gets thin quick. Mark Andrews and Cole Kmet. 2 good tight ends again. 6 thinnish receivers. I feel better about the running backs, especially on a McCaffrey team, having Brown, Rico, and then Bucky and Tyrone Tracy as upside rookies. Got the 2 QBs locked up. Pretty big capital invested at QB with Stroud and Purdy, and at tight end with Andrews, and then Kmet is a reasonably high number 2. I got the Stroud Collins here with the Andrews bringback figured out. I got the Purdy McCaffrey with no bringback. Purdy was 14 picks after ADP, so I just took him with McCaffrey, and at that point, I didn't have a chance to get into a Detroit bringback, but I took the discount. Certainly, McCaffrey is a pass-catching running back and somebody that you can stack your quarterback with. So, 2-5-6-2. At this 16-17 turn, I just need wide receivers. One of them is going to be Devontae Walker. He's another bringback on the Houston-Baltimore game. Love adding him when you have the Stroud, Nico, Andrews thing going on. The other one, I mean, I could take a running back. I could take a Tank Bigsby and leave wide receiver for the last round. Bigsby doesn't really correlate, but I do think he's just mispriced by quite a bit. I don't think he's great or anything. He was a really young rookie last year, though. Didn't play a ton. They went back to him late in the year. They tried him early. He didn't play well. They went to Dearness Johnson as the backup. They went back to Bigsby a little bit more late in the year, and they've been talking all offseason about him. They didn't bring anyone else in. He was a day 2 pick for them. Like, they like him. And he had a decent enough prospect profile, especially as a young guy. So, yeah, I keep hearing about this Keelan Robinson guy. He says he's a Jags RB dart throw. Nick says, they're telling us they want Tank, but maybe I'm not putting enough weight into this Keelan Robinson buzz. Khalif Raymond would be a Detroit bringback. It's gross. It's just not a pick you can make. Jalen Tolbert is the ADP guy at the top. He was really bad last year, and there's really no reason to suspect that he'll be any better this year. But the 17th round, I will take a Tolbert. I tweeted about him recently. I'm not advocating taking a lot of Jalen Tolbert. I got him. I actually took him ahead of ADP. Got him at pick 193 there. I am not advocating tweeting or taking a lot of him. I tweeted about him the other day, and I wrote, based on a rap sheet tweet that said, "I'm telling you he's going to crush it. He's ready." I quote tweeted that and wrote, Tolbert's only run 315 routes through 2 years, so maybe something could be unlocked with more consistent usage. As far as predicting a breakout, worth noting the 315 routes we've seen haven't been productive. I originally wrote that much more like derogatorily, like they've been very unproductive. They were terrible, something like that. And also, somebody pointed out to me that the lack of routes is predictive in and of itself, which, yes, was supposed to be part of the point of the tweet, but I didn't write it in a way that emphasized any of that. So I got a bunch of people being like, no, dude, he sucks. I was like, no, I was trying to write that he sucks in a nice way. I ended up writing a reply. I was like, I softened this because the first way I wrote it felt like I was just shitting on the player, and the replies aren't having it. So I got like 3 or 4 replies that were like, yeah, dude, this guy's bad. Like, he's just not good. Don't draft him. And I was like, that was what I was trying to write, was that he's only run 315 routes through 2 years and they've been unproductive. Like, that in my world is a diss. I just want to be clear. I mean, I don't know why I just drafted him, honestly. Like, I should have just taken another DJ Chark. DJ Chark's the guy that I take more often, but I've taken a ton of DJ Chark at this point. Rondell Moore is another one that I think could be actually kind of interesting. I probably should be mixing in some Darius Slayton. I took Tolbert in part because I have Rico Dowdle on this team, and I was just like, all right, well, I'm already making a little bit of a bet on Dallas. Like, I don't know. That could be like CeeDee Lamb gets hurt kind of a season for them where they're just giving volume to like bad players. They're so thin. Anyway, I'm not proud of that pick. All right, next team, 2-4-5-2. Jaden Daniels, Jared Goff are the QBs. Joe Mixon, Zach Moss, Brian Robinson, and Zach Charbonnet are the running backs. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Olave, Cooper Kupp, Xavier Worthy, Deontay Johnson, the only 5 receivers. So I have 4 running backs and only 5 receivers at this point. A Joe Mixon pick, 9 picks after ADP. Trey McBride and Ben Sinnott. Sinnott gives me a Daniels, Robinson, Sinnott, Washington thing, or Sinnott. I don't know how to say his name. There is no Atlanta bring back on that either, and I take so much Atlanta. It's just frustrating that I'm not getting any of this built out. Although I have McBride and Kupp. I thought this was a stack there, but it's not. I have Goff with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I don't have a San Francisco bring back. Have a little mini in there. A lot of these teams, I don't have the bring backs and the stacks built out the ways that I wish I did. I wish I was doing a little bit more proactive thinking through some of that stuff. The pick here by ADP is Kamani Vidal. I still really like him. I want to get a lot of exposure to him in the 160s. Even though I only have the 5 receivers, I'm going to take my RB5 here, and I'm just going to keep pushing receiver a little bit later. Let's go to this Chihuahua. I have 2 late-round QB star, Daniel Jones and Bo Nix. It's only a Brock Purdy team, 1-4-7-2. Purdy, Saquon on this one of the ones where I let Saquon fall a little bit, but took him in the late second. Mostert, Marshawn Lloyd, or Jalen Wright, Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors, Amari Cooper, Brian Thomas, Curtis Samuel, Jacoby Myers, and Marvin Mims. So I must have Kittle. Yeah, Andrews Kittle. The only Purdy thing is Kittle with no Detroit bring back. I do have Cincinnati, and so I have Nix could go with Mims and has a Jamar Chase bring back. Daniel Jones could go with Neighbors. I don't have an Indy bring back on that. I want this to be Nix. I'm just checking if there's any other late round stacks that I want to target. It is Nix that I really want here. I feel like I can push him to the late 16. Should still be 20 picks ahead of ADP, but at a certain point, you just take your guys. at this stage. I am going to push quarterback because Ray Davis is still there. He's a nice pick at this price. Throw another rookie running back onto another build. Barkley, Mostert, Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright, and now Ray Davis is going to be that running back room. All right. So Meatwad said, Gretsch, considering you seem down on Ferg, Zeke, Dowdle, Tolbert, how are you playing Dallas as a whole? Soft fading outside of CD, or would CD be your 101? Curious how you're tackling it. Yeah, he's not really my 101, and maybe that's wrong. I do think there's some concern for Dallas to just not be very good, like as good as people want them to be when they don't have any good players. And at the same time, like last year when they ran into this problem, they just used a ton of CD Lamb. But it's also like, yeah, it just becomes a little bit more spread out and those types of things. Like Ferguson doesn't I'm not necessarily like down on him. I was saying that I think he's going to be a small win player. Like I think he's going to be a small win. That's a positive. FF Doom said all this Tolbert talk means we should draft more Ferg and Cooks. I mean, Dallas is interesting. I don't have strong answers on it. I do think players have to be good enough to soak up volume. It's not just, oh, there's no one there. So like that's how you wind up with some of the worst picks in fantasy every year. It's like there was no one there, so I had to take this guy. Let's spin the wheel now. And maybe we'll get Dallas and look at them a little bit more. For those who don't know what we're doing here, we're gonna remember some guys. That's not the right place to go. I can't even remember. Wheel of names. Whatever team we come up with, we're gonna remember some guys. And then we are going to look at that to talk about the 2023 season a little bit, the 2024 expectations. Most of you guys probably remember this. I always think it's fun to do the remember some guys thing. Jimmy Smith, Keenan McCardle. They had some good team. Mike Sims Walker. Remember that name? Maurice Jones-Drew. Oh, whoops. I didn't mean to spin that again. We're just going to close this out. We got the Jaguars. Who else you guys got? Keelan Cole. My mic keeps going underwater. I wonder if that's something with the plug, because the plug's been kind of broke. Mark Brunell, shout out my UW Huskies helmet back here. Fred Taylor, Matt Jones. Matt Jones was not. David Garrard, Byron Leftwich. Remember those dudes? I mean, obviously Byron Leftwich, we know him. What else you guys got? Oh, the mic it's only when the wheel is spinning, it messes with the mic. That's right. Justin Blackman. Tony Baselli, Bortles. And he does it in the quotes from The Good Place. Love that. Denard Robinson. LeBrandon Toefield, Allen Robinson. I don't remember Tebow being on that team, but maybe late. Oh, yeah. Urban Meyer brought him in. Allen Robinson, Denard Robinson. Those are good ones. All right. Let's look at the Jags season last year. I guess my big take on the Jags is that they had really high expectations last year. They sort of just underperformed them. I don't think like Trevor Lawrence can't still be good. He's only 24. Going to be turning 25 here. There's a lot of quarterbacks that, I mean, physically we don't see quarterbacks fall off, and it's such a mental position that a lot of times we'd see quarterbacks continue to learn more and more about coverages and reads and all of those things and get more and more and more reps. And a lot of times they don't hit their prime until they're 30 plus. You know, you see a lot of guys that have some of the issues that Trevor Lawrence has. Lawrence at least is willing to push it downfield and be vertical, and those are all very positive things. And that type of like gunslinger mentality sometimes can manifest in really good seasons later in guys' career. I certainly am not giving up on Trevor Lawrence at this stage. I mean, I'm thinking like Brett Favre had some of his best careers really late in his career, right? Like or best years of his career. Like with the Vikings was, I think, his best season when he was like 41. It was like his last full season. And, you know, you had the Bounty Gate game in the NFC Championship. They maybe had a shot to go to the Super Bowl. I think he's continuing to progress. I still think Doug Peterson's a competent head coach. We see a definite fall off in his numbers, at least in his TDs, and an increase in his interceptions. But the yardage was very similar, actually. The yards per attempt, very similar. Last year, it felt at times like they were force-feeding Calvin Ridley to sort of justify bringing him in. He wound up with 136 targets. I don't know that he really fit. Like his ADOT, like he needed to exist in the underneath a little bit. And I actually, like when they brought in Gabe Davis, the point that I made, let's actually just go over to the yards per out run. When they brought in Gabe Davis, the point that I made was see, here's Jake Ferguson on the screen. 1.46 yards per out run, 18.4 targets per out run. He was better the year prior, but only on 105 routes. This yards per out run essentially matches Dalton Schultz from last year. It's like the exact same profile. And this is actually Dalton Schultz's best season in 2021. 1.47 yards per out run, 18.4% targets per out run. Jake Ferguson last year, 1.46, 18.4%. Ferguson had a little lower ADOT, but the exact same yards per target, basically. So he was a little more efficient when you control for ADOT, and he has a little bit more touchdown upside, probably, I would say, because he is a big-bodied guy, and as Corain's pointed out, he's out there for pass or for run blocking and stuff, which I think Schultz was too, but like this is just not a very strong season. It's the same thing Schultz gave you in Houston last year. It doesn't, like, Jake Ferguson needs to show me more. Just because Dallas has targets available doesn't mean I think Jake Ferguson's going to be able to earn $1 million. He's got to show me. It's all about these routes. He ran 500 routes. It's a lot for a tight end. That's what Dalton Schultz did in his best years. That's good. That's a small win player. I mean, if he's got to take this up, and maybe he can. Anyway, we're talking about the Jaguars. When they brought in Gabe Davis, I thought, Calvin Ridley had to play at like a 13.9 ADOT. He did that at times early in his career. His best season was a high ADOT season. But there's other times when he was more of like a lower ADOT guy, like especially go back to 2018, which is probably his rookie year. That's a big number of routes where he was a lower ADOT guy. He didn't really seem to fit in this role and what they needed from him. Gabe Davis is a high ADOT player. The targets per out run are not going to be good, but the yards per target are going to be good. He's going to be efficient once the target is earned. His TD rates are really strong too. We all laughed at him on social when he became a free agent, and he sent out like a tweet that was like, showed that he's like one of the best players in the league in per target efficiency since he came into the league, because it is kind of funny when you have a 14.1% targets per run, you're not even earning any volume, but it is a fact. It's a stat. Like, people don't like Gabe Davis, but when after the target is thrown to him, every year of his career, he's had a really strong yards per target. I think he's a good ball tracker. I think he's a good deep threat in terms of like playing that specific role. And then when you think about schematically what that brings to the offense, it allows for them to then work underneath to Calvin Ridley, more of a traditional number one, needs to just win and stuff. But Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram are these guys that are running a lot of routes underneath, probably not earning huge volume. These are not massive targets per route run, right? Lower ADOTs, especially Ingram. But you talk about guys that can be efficient and solid in the underneath areas, and Kirk and Ingram are those two dudes. And Kirk, the ADOT's not super, super low. It can still stretch downfield a little bit. But Gabe Davis is going to stress safeties. And then the other guy who's going to is our boy Brian Thomas, who now this is the college version of the same spreadsheet, college yards per route run database. Brian Thomas, okay, so for this one goes a little bit wider, but targets per route run never even over 20% in college for a first-round wide receiver is low, is very low. Like by comparison, Keon Coleman gets knocked, and he's at 22, 23%. If I go to Marvin Harrison, you're going to see 29.7% and 32.4% targets per route run the last 2 years. Like that's an alpha legit star. Roma Dunze gets knocked a little bit, and he doesn't have elite numbers, but he goes 27%, 24, 25 in a more spread passing game, 22% even as a rookie on limited routes. Like you go back to Brian Thomas, this guy never earned a target on 20% of his routes. What he did last year is he had a 13.5 yards per target. He hit on a bunch of deep targets. He had 17 touchdowns because he's this deep beast, athletic beast. He's better than Gabe Davis. Somebody in a comment in a video at one point this offseason called him Fancy Gabe Davis. From a ADOT and efficiency after the target, but low target per route run perspective, he is Fancy Gabe Davis. That fits. Right. I got called out on that on Twitter. Somebody like snitch tagged me to Matt Harmon, was like, I want to see Brian Thomas's because Ben Gretsch called him Fancy Gabe Davis. And I was like, I didn't call him that. A commenter did, but also like, I kind of stand by that. Like it's not, is it? So the chat saying, is that because Thomas was number 2? And the answer is no. Like the short answer is no. Like a good number 2 should still be higher than this. Jacob Cowing played with Troya McMillan, who's probably the number 1 wide receiver in the 2024 class. He had like a 1,400-yard season for Arizona last year. One of the reasons I really like Cowing's late-round profile is even despite playing with an elite. So these first 3 years for Cowing, he was at UTEP, and then he transfers to Arizona in 2022. These final 2 years, he's over a 25% targets per out run despite playing with an elite number 1 wide receiver in Tetroya McMillan, who's going to be a future first-round pick that had like 1,400 receiving yards. That's just the immediate example that came to mind of a number 2. But even like Jalen Polk wasn't good enough, but he was at 21.3% last year. Jalen McMillan, who this is my UW guys, he was at 26.3. He didn't run a ton of routes. 24.9 the year prior, playing alongside those Adunze numbers I shared, which are in the 24-25% range. So it's not hard for 2 guys to be in a similar range. Now, yeah, I mean, Malik Neighbors, like, so one thing is Malik Neighbors the first 2 years wasn't even that high, 21.4, 24.0. They had Kayshon Boutte at the same time. So this comes into the, I misspelled his name. This comes into the discussion where like, but Boutte was really good in 2020, and then he got weaker throughout his 2 years at earning volume as Neighbors started to like take some from him. And then you see Neighbors really take off last year when Boutte was in the NFL. Gets up to 29.7%, earns a ton of volume, is efficient, has this massive yards per out run. That's an elite profile. Brian Thomas, like, just never takes from anyone. He never takes from Boutte. And then when Boutte's gone, Malik Neighbors makes the huge jump and Thomas doesn't. And it's just kind of, I mean, his ADOT went up. So his weighted targets per out run took a little bit of a jump in terms of like when we wait for the air yards. But the other concern is that his yards per target the first 2 seasons weren't good. So his yards per out run here, 134 and 140 in his first 2 seasons in college are not good. Now, last year, it's elite. It's, not really elite because in college, some of these guys are 3+, but very, very good at 2.61, which is, again, yards per out run is yards per target and targets per out run. Makes sense, right? Yards per target, target per out, yards per route. So sometimes you get a good number and it's really heavy on one side or the other, and that's the case here. He didn't earn a lot of targets, but he was very efficient on those targets. It bumped up his yards per out run into a really playable number. I'm not trying to say Brian Thomas is bad. I am trying to say that if you can't earn 20% or target on 20% of your routes in college, and you're very dependent on just deep threat production, where he was incredible. The 13.5 yards per target is awesome, and the 17 touchdowns needs to be emphasized again. So, like, It's not like we're just saying he only had a few long touchdowns. He had 17 of them with Jaden Daniels last year. He was awesome. And you go back and you watch those plays, he makes a lot of really good plays down the field. There's also a couple where Jaden Daniels' athleticism and ability to extend plays helps Brian Thomas a little bit. He extends a play, and then Brian Thomas is open. And this gets back to some concern, not massive concern, but some concern about Brian Thomas's ability to consistently earn volume. I think he played up a little bit with Jaden Daniels, who was mobile and then hitting him down the field. It's really the freshman and sophomore years, though, even without the efficiency, that bother me. And then he doesn't take up the volume earning in his final year. The efficiency is good. I'm not saying you write that off. It's good and it matters and it's important. But I'm not taking a ton of Brian Thomas. Now that he's fallen into the 70s, I have taken him. I wasn't taking him in the 60s. Because I do think that's a lofty price for a guy who has target earning concerns. That doesn't mean I think that I'm certain to be right about him, because like we should be open to uncertainty with prospects all the time, and draft capital is the best predictor. He went in the first round. So, I mean, if he was going a little bit lower, 75 or lower, if he was going in the 80s, I would be drafting him for sure. When you see him in the 60s, the late 60s, you're starting to talk about like the opportunity cost of like him or George Kittle, right? You guys know I love the elite tight ends. You're starting to talk about some different wide receivers in those ranges that I would prefer to him, even though he is an upside play, a vertical threat. But then the thing I want to emphasize here as well, though, is he also brings more redundancy in terms of threatening defenses vertically. And so when you start talking about the scheme stuff, one of the concerns I have for Brian Thomas and for Gabe Davis, and why I think Gabe Davis's targets per run has fallen the last few years, is the cover 2 shell stuff and putting more defenders on the field, more zone coverage, and eliminating explosive plays. Defensive coordinators have told us this. We know that the goal of defenses at this point in the NFL is to eliminate explosives, and it takes away this type of player. So that's the other big concern for me with Brian Thomas, is the 17 touchdowns in college that were a lot of deep threats. They were all deep shots. It's hard to do that in the NFL right now, and that becomes a concern. However, what he does bring to the table is Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis can now attack vertically on both sides of the field. Or if Gabe Davis is bad, they can bench him. They can both take time if one of them misses some time. They're going to have somebody to stress defenses. The Jaguars are going to be one of these teams that forces defenses into the deep shell stuff and forces them to have safeties and defensive backs over the top. And because of that, what I love are these two players. I love the fact that, I mean, people talk about Patrick Mahomes had the really low ADOT last year and everything. Evan Ingram, 143 targets last year, 114 receptions, really low ADOT. We just looked at that. Christian Kirk, really good per route, only played 12 games, 85 targets, 57 receptions. Those guys are going to catch a lot of balls underneath when Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis are stressing downfield. Now, Trevor Lawrence is willing to take shots, and he will take shots, and I think Brian Thomas is going to have big plays. There's some chats on here. Do I feel Thomas is overpriced in ADP? I do. I just mentioned that. I do think that he is like sliding enough that I would start to consider him. He's a 99.7 RAS guy. He's super athletic, big, super athletic. I think Brian Thomas can play at the NFL level. He could be like the new DK Metcalf, who didn't have great college production and yet was a stud in the NFL. There's ways I can be wrong on Brian Thomas. The other thing I've thought about Brian Thomas is he might not just be a vertical guy in the pros. They might be thinking Gabe Davis is our vertical guy, and then that opens up Brian Thomas to be running more intermediate crossers and things like that. We're just running Gabe Davis on the goes to pull the safeties. What happens if Gabe Davis is the one stressing downfield and now Brian Thomas is eating underneath in addition to some deep shots at times? Now Brian Thomas is a smash as a rookie. So I don't want to be too confident how they're going to use him and that his ADOT's going to be this high in college or anything. It's just, in the pros as it was in college. It's just that he never earned volume at a high rate in college. Now, I know he was playing with Malik Neighbors, but I showed you guys even on some other offenses where there was like 3 good receivers, you didn't see that low of targets per out run for draftable wide receivers. It's just not strong. It's not a strong target earning potential, which is a route running thing. That the way I use targets per out run and that kind of thing in prospects, a lot of people will reference Matt Harmon's great work for back to me, and I use it. I use the numbers similarly. I don't do as much film watching as him naturally, but what I often hear is when people tell me that a guy's a really good route runner, it almost always pairs up with the targets per route, or at least when you adjust for ADOT and some of those elements. It's not going to be perfect, but it tends to reflect on, like, if his scouting and his film watching tells you that this guy's really good at getting open, then his targets per route are going to be really strong as well. Now, what he's looking at is every play, including ones where the guy doesn't get targeted. But my hypothesis, which makes sense, is that the quarterback is going to notice that. The film guys are going to notice that. Even if the quarterback's missing the player, the film guys are going to notice it. This guy keeps getting open. You got to get to this part of the progression, and the targets are going to start to follow, and eventually the targets per out are going to be solid for that player. There tends to be a directional correlation. I don't know what he did for charting on Brian Thomas, but my point is just that that's sort of how I think about it. If you can't earn big targets per route, you're probably not really great at consistently getting open every single play. So even if his usage is what I just said, Gabe Davis is a deep threat and they're using him in the intermediate, I wonder if he would struggle at those routes at the NFL level, because he didn't ever really show us in college that he could do a lot of that and earn volume in a big, big way. So Brian Thomas, one of the more interesting players to me this year in fantasy, one of the more interesting rookies in a long time. I'm concerned about him, obviously. I also respect that, like, the draft capital really matters. He's incredibly athletic, and I could be wrong here. Shout out the Cecil Shorts reference from Historical Anomalies. Jimmy Smith, Keenan McCardle, I mentioned those guys. That was a fun early career Jaguar. This was back when we were doing the old school. We got Dan Arnold, Jags legend Hugh Douglas. He was actually really an Eagles legend, obviously. Our hero, James Robinson, James O'Shaughnessy for half a year. You guys had some other good, remember some guys from this team. If we're going to going upside spike weeks, I don't know how BTJ and McConkey are close, let alone ADP flips. Yeah, no, McConkey's overpriced, first of all. But second of all, in terms of like upside, I was talking about it from a more full season upside thing. The idea of spike weeks, I think, is overstated. I think there's too much focus sometimes on the 1 week upside. I obviously understand that that's what's necessary to win any of these contests, and that does still matter. And I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but when I'm talking upside, I was talking about it earlier more from the perspective of full season upside. What's the kind of stat line this guy can put up? Because really, you need a guy who's just like a really good hit at price. Like, a lot of people are like, yeah, what if he's the guy you need? Yeah, but like, what if he's the guy you need and the other 17 players you drafted suck and your team didn't make the... I mean, I'm not trying to be an advance rate, bro, but like, you start to get to these people that are really focused only on spike weeks, and I look at their team and I'm like, this team's not finishing in the top 6 of its league, of its pod, of its 12, let alone, the top 2, and then advancing to week 17. Like, you still have to draft a good team. Like, this stuff all matters in addition to drafting full season upside. That's the part of it that I'm, really focused on. So Brian Thomas is a guy that can bring you upside spike weeks. Yes, he loads in some week 17, 1 week spike potential. He could be the guy that you need in the way that George Pickens was, after not a strong season from George Pickens all year. But the George Pickens teams that like made that work were built strongly around that. And that's one of the things that, really does need to be emphasized. If you make this type of a swing, what are you getting into your receiver build in terms of consistent targets and all that stuff? If you think you're doing it purely for weekly upside, make sure you're getting other consistent target volume guys around him. This would be my, I guess, response. I wouldn't be banking on him to be hitting your lineup with usable weeks every week, because that's just a tricky outcome, unless I'm just completely wrong on the profile and he's just a stud, which is, again, that's possible as well. So there's multiple outs. I'm not saying he's definitely a horrible pick. You'll never hear me say a rookie is a bad pick. Like, I think people should be drafting more rookies, generally speaking. But there are some that are trickier profiles to bank on and to bet on. So that's, one of the issues for him there. Scrolling through the chat a little bit more. Utah Sports says, seems it's bad for T-Law if he's dumping off to Ingram all the time again this year. That wasn't a winning game plan this last year. I hear that. I think there's shades to this. It's if you can't get vertical, if you don't have an ability to actually win vertically, and then all you're doing is dumping off underneath, and then you're throwing interceptions every time you try to get vertical. What they have now is, I think Gabe Davis is a better deep threat than Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley is a better receiver. I'm not trying to dog Calvin Ridley, and people hate when you say anything good about Gabe Davis. But the thing that Gabe Davis is good at, he's good at. We just talked about that. Once the target is thrown his direction, he's actually really efficient. He's good at tracking the ball. He's a big physical downfield receiver who's done a lot of good stuff in his career. At the catch point after the target's earned. So I think this is a fair point, but I think you have to think about it from the dynamic of like, they're actually going to be able to be successful down the field now, not because of Gabe Davis, more because of Brian Thomas. But when you add both Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas now, I think are two upgrades on your best vertical presence last year. You're actually going to be able to hit on some of these shots downfield and be good on them. And first of all, just being able to hit on a couple of those throughout the year bumps the stats across the board, right? Like a couple long touchdowns matter big time. And I talked about this the other day, but like 260-yard touchdowns is 120 yards for the year for a guy who has 120 targets, a full-time receiver. That's, 260-yard touchdowns will bump their yards per target a full yard. 2 plays out of 120 plays. And it doesn't have quite the impact on a quarterback stats, but it's a similar effect, right? Like you hit some big plays, your yards per attempt look a lot better. He's going to be able to do that a little bit this year, I think, Lawrence. And then the underneath stuff doesn't look like it's a necessity, like they had to go underneath. It looks more like it's like they're willing to take what the defense has given them because it is high percentage stuff, because they forced the defense back. And so you do have offenses that can be functional that throw underneath a lot, as long as they can threaten downfield and then open up the underneath in a way that is really high percentage. The underneath wasn't high percentage for them last year. It could be this year. That's sort of what I'm arguing, is that I think the underneath could suddenly be more open for more like a higher completion rate. And that part of it, the efficiency on downfield passing is better, and the efficiency on underneath passing is better. It could be a really fun passing game. The way that you think about the ways that these different profiles attack the different levels of the defense. I'm just reading through the chat now a little bit. A lot of thoughts on the Ladd comment. Yeah, the issue with Ladd for me, I don't think he's like massively underpriced. He could be good. Could be very good. But there's some concern that that offense is going to play some tight ends. Rich Rebar mentioned on a pod I was on yesterday, and shout out to Rich, that, the Greg Roman offense does a lot of 2 tight end stuff. And there's possibilities that Ladd's not even out there in the 2 wide receiver sets with the 2 tight ends. He's just playing in the slot, because like Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnston, even DJ Chark, their other receivers are all outside receivers. And so if they're thinking Ladd is the slot guy, they might not have him out there in 2 receiver sets. Somebody mentioned Keenan Allen. They use Keenan in 2 receiver sets because he was like their star, but that's not like a guarantee for Ladd as a rookie right away. But yeah, that range of rookie receivers tough, because you throw Keon Coleman in there too. Their profiles all have some question marks, and they're all pretty priced up. The market likes rookie receivers now. I would like to make those bets cheaper. But I get it. There's available opportunity, particularly Ladd and Keon. You can tell yourself they could be the number 1 wide receiver. Brian Thomas, a little bit trickier to see that path. However, he's very good. Very efficient, very good at scoring touchdowns. I'm not trying to dog the guy because he was scoring touchdowns. Do I go Addison over all those guys? Yes, I do. I do go Addison over those guys, because Addison had a good rookie year last year, and year 2 breakouts are obviously a thing as well. Do have a quarterback change, but I like Addison over those rookies. The other side of this we haven't talked about. The passing game is really intriguing. But Travis Etienne, I mean, only 3.8 yards per carry last year in the end. He winds up struggling down the stretch. If we go to his game log, they start to limit his snaps a little bit more. Early season, you see on the right side here, 80% snaps in week 1, 72 and 71, but then 85, 83, 80, 88, 89. That's through week 8. He's playing 80% of the snaps every week. The next week, they go down to 61. Actually, that's not the next week. So they have a bye there. So there's 2 columns here on the left side, game number and week number. Game number goes to 9. Week number goes from 8 to 10. They had a week 9 bye. It's just one way in the game logs. You can see that if you're ever on Pro Football Reference. So coming out of the bye right there, you see the immediate drop off in the snap rate, 61% in the first game out of the bye. And then he's not back up over 70% until one game here in week 14. He gets to 78, and one more game in week 16, 73. The rest of the way, it's all 60% range otherwise. So 7 of his final 9 games. And in all 9, he's sub 80%, which before the bye, he was 80% plus in 6 of 8 games. And they talked about this. They didn't want to be riding him as hard. You look at the rush attempt numbers in the first half. 20 attempts in week 4, 26 in 5, 24 in week 8, and his efficiency's lagging in some of those games. Taking a little bit of a pounding. In the back half, he only has 120 carry game. I think they think using him less keeps him fresh and he's a little bit more explosive. We do see, something to that hypothesis. In week 17, 16 carries, 102, 2 touchdowns, a little bit less usage, a little bit more explosive, maybe. I don't know. But good to see that he was still producing down the stretch. The other column that I would highlight here in his game log is the reception column. He had multiple receptions in every game all season. That was an issue for Etienne prior, that they weren't getting him the ball in the pass game enough. In full PPR, even in half PPR, this is great, but in full PPR especially, 2+ catches in every single game all year is something you love to see. Even in the second half when he was playing less, and as he didn't play his rookie year as a second-year player, he was pretty much full-time. He had 220 attempts, 45 targets, 35 receptions. In his second season, 267 attempts, so more rushing, and he was playing more. But he gets all the way up to 73 targets, 58 receptions. You see that, my point being the rushing role wasn't that much different, but a massive increase in the receiving. The targets go up 28, the receptions go up 23. He's not necessarily as explosive yards per reception, so the receiving yards don't go up quite as high. But we do see just an overall bump in the receiving fantasy production, which is nice. And more rushing TDs was the other big thing. He was a more efficient runner in year 1, 5.1 yards per carry, down to 3.8 last year overall with more volume. They want to keep him fresher. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think we need him to carry the ball 267 times. He went 220 carries in his second season, 2022, and still ran for more yards than he did last year and quite a few more yards. So if he's down in the lower parts of the 200s, 225 carries, but that's helping him get back, in the high 4s in yards per carry, then it doesn't really matter. We're not losing rushing yardage and that kind of stuff. It would suck if we lost a lot of goal line work as part of this, because he only had 5 rushing TDs in year 2. He had 11 last year. Those touchdowns are important, obviously. And then if the efficiency just carries over because he's lost a step or whatever, that's a problem. But he was efficient enough in year 2, very efficient, and not horrible last year while taking a lot of work that I think you can suspect, and along with his profile, that, and he's still young enough that he's a pretty good running back, pretty efficient running back. You don't have to pay first, second round prices. You can get him in the 4th round. I think he's still a viable pick. He shouldn't be going that late, probably, especially in this atmosphere where nobody wants to take any of the top running backs. There's not enough that's different about him than some of, the backs that go a round or 2 rounds ahead of him. He's the clear lead in a good offense. There's a lot of reasons to be, somewhat into Etienne. And then Bigsby, we were talking about earlier on this stream. I want to look at him and also Dearness Johnson. I keep forgetting. I did that in a different window. But so Bigsby in 2023 is the backup in the early part of the year. Again, offensive snaps in the right column. He's playing 15 snaps in week 1, 13 in week 2. You get some 9, 8, 13, 17, 8, etc. All the way through about week 10, week 11. And then suddenly he's just not playing for 5 games. That's when Dearness Johnson took over the the backup role. He had 2 snaps in week 12 and then 2, 1, 1, 0. For 5 games, a total of 6 snaps. Then they went back to him the final 2 weeks a little bit. They played him for 17 snaps and 9 snaps in the final 2 games. Didn't do much, all year. 2.6 yards per carry. He wasn't good. But they did use day 2 draft capital on him. 3rd round pick. And he was a 21-year-old rookie. Or I guess it was his age 22 season technically. He'll turn. It's not really a technical thing. I guess he was a 22-year-old rookie. He turned 22 on August 30th, right before the season. So still a very young 22. He'll turn 23 right before this season. But yeah, not a good year for Bigsby, but they're talking him up this offseason as well. Dearness Johnson's a 28-year-old kind of journeyman. And I just was going to show in Dearness Johnson's snaps, like he took over the backup role in this stretch in like the late third quarter of, if you split the season into quarters, the third quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, he gave back some snaps to Tank Bigsby, but still was very, very involved in the second half of the season. You don't like to see that in terms of if you're betting on Bigsby, but Bigsby goes in the very last round. If he can earn that number 2 job, you're talking about potentially some standalone role, because I don't think they want to use Etienne in that 80% snap role plus handcuff value. And I think that's worth taking some swings at. I keep saying the 20th round, 18th round, whatever. Because he does seem like the clear clubhouse leader with the draft capital investment and all of that stuff. Nick's mentioning Keelan Robinson again. Definitely look into him. What was he, a UDFA this year? Or did they draft him? I honestly haven't looked into him enough. He was a 5th round pick. Let's look into him for a moment, because I might as well do it now while I'm on stream. 5-year guy, played for 2 years at Alabama, then transferred to Texas. Wasn't very heavily used at Alabama. Leaves for Texas. Only 12 carries last year because he was behind Jonathan Brooks. But even Jonathan Brooks tore his ACL late. It's interesting. In 2021, he was playing more. That's when, Texas had Bijan at that time too. They had Bijan, Roschon Johnson, and Jonathan Brooks, and Keelan Robinson was still playing a little bit, playing ahead of Jonathan Brooks. It looks like Jonathan Brooks winds up beating him out. Texas is freaking crazy with how many running backs they had. In 2022, similar deal. Bijan, Roschon, Jonathan Brooks, and Keelan Robinson. Can you imagine? That's a lot of really good running back production. I'm pulling up his RAS score. He's like pretty solid in RAS, not incredible. But ran a 4.42, which is good. Fast, but he's small, 5'8", 191. And his shuttle wasn't great. For a small guy, I want to see a good shuttle. But at least he's fast. So he's an undersized 5'8", 191. So I did notice he was catching more passes than some of the other backs in the Texas backfield. They were treating him a little bit like their passing down guy. That could be bad for Etienne if Keelan Robinson makes a team and plays. I don't think a 5'8", 191 guy is likely to be the clear backup to Etienne. I think actually looking into him makes me more comfortable with my Bigsby stuff, in the sense that, like, yeah, Keelan could maybe be the like the Jaleel McLaughlin or something, where he's the situational role playing, slasher, change of pace guy. But I don't think they would make him the every down backup. There would still be in this, for this analogy with the Broncos, a Samaje Perine. David says Achane sized the new Dearness. Yeah, I mean Dearness was playing a lot on passing downs, so that would be the case, is that he would take some of Dearness Johnson's work on passing downs, and Bigsby maybe is just the early down backup. Nick saying sees him as a nice little motion swing RB, maybe snag a few targets a game. Wouldn't be RB1 if Etienne went down, though. 100% agree. Tyler saying this team screams free agent edition, a la Hunt. If they roll with Bigsby, I'll have to have more Etienne because he's clearly better than every back. I think that's true. I think that's one of the reasons you do want to be in on Etienne, is he is pretty much clearly better than every back. And Bigsby's not a guy that I would chase up, because there is concern about whether he's even good enough to be the backup. This is one of those situations where it's not clear. Like right now, it seems like he's probably the number 2 from a size and profile perspective. But again, ran for 2.6 yards per carry last year. He caught 1 pass on 4 targets. He wasn't using the passing game. Dearness Johnson was the backup on pass downs, essentially. And so, like, what is Tank Bigsby? What does he bring to the table is a big question mark. Whether he could even be good enough. Because if he's not good enough, he won't play. They'll do something else. They'll bring someone else in, whether that's, Tyler's Kareem Hunt stuff, or and Bindle says your love for Hunt knows no bounds. Or whether it's, playing Keelan Robinson opposite, maybe Bigsby still playing in that scenario, or Dearness Johnson, or whatever, some other big back that they just sign off because Bigsby's not doing it. The point is, like, it's not just about predicting who the team likes and who they're saying they like and who they invested in. It's who's good enough to then give you upside. Because if Bigsby goes and play, even if he plays a lot, Etienne goes down. If he's bad, he's not going to score fantasy points, right? Like, that's a problem. You don't get there just by him playing snaps. You need him to gain yards and score touchdowns. And some of the chat saying, if I'm taking a Jacksonville backup, I'll waste the pick on Dearness. I mean, these are fair criticisms of Tank Bigsby. I'm with you guys. I understand where you guys are coming from on this. But I will say his price in the 18th round, for me, makes it a gamble I'm willing to consider, because he was a young rookie last year, turned 22 in August 30th. We just talked about this, because they went back to him late in the year and they've already talked him up, and they've pretty clearly said, Tank's a guy we want to be involved. And because they don't seem to want to use Etienne as an every down guy. And so it's like, okay, well, I mean, an 18th round running back that has the potential to actually get touches and have contingent based upside these are fair, a new iteration of that's fair. I've noticed since that's fair has been brought up so much around the ADP chasing stuff, which is hilarious, that I say that's fair a lot. And now I'm like, every time I say it, I'm like, God damn it, I can't say that anymore. Like, it's been ruined for me. I have a habit of saying that's fair as much as, Sam and everybody else. That's pretty funny. All right. Yeah, I mean, Meatwad says, I respect that he's free. It's just tough for me to click on the QJ or running backs. I wonder if that's a Quentin Johnson reference. The reason I highlight this is he says it's tough for him to click on it. Maybe I need to get more uncomfortable with clicking on running backs in the last round, because I keep pushing running backs in all these builds because I'm like, well, whatever, I can find upside late. And it might be that I'm a little bit too optimistic in whatever quote unquote upside there is late. All right, let's jump into this draft here. We're in round 18. This one's going to cap it off. This is a 3-5-7-2. This is one where I grabbed Justin Fields and I have Daniel Jones. I think I did this before even hearing about the Daniel Jones concerns, but Joe Burrow, Daniel Jones, and Justin Fields. The 5 running backs, and I have in the queue a bunch of wide receivers. So I think this 5 running back build is fine. I can stop at 5. Kenneth Walker, Raheem Mostert, Chase Brown, Tyjae Spears, Kendre Miller. I'll go to bat with that running back room any day. You guys know I love Chase, Tyjae, and Kendre Miller. Kenneth Walker and Raheem Mostert's a stronger one, too, than a lot of my builds. Jamar Chase, Brandon Ayuk, Malik Neighbors, Zay Flowers, Rashee Rice, Xavier Legette, Wan'Dale Robinson is a really nice 7. I mean, when you have Rashee Rice as the 5 and your top 4 are Chase, Ayuk, Neighbors, Flowers, and then this is Kincaid, Musgrave. This is another one where I got a nice value in the 4th. The last one we talked about this on, I got Tank Dell in the 4th, and then I got Kincaid in the 5th. This is one where I got Zay Flowers well into the 4th, and then I got Kincaid in the 5th. Again, these are slows that have been going on for weeks. This was right after, sort of BBM opened and these contests opened. You were able to get those values a little bit more frequently. I was writing at the time about how I loved the 4 wide receiver start with a 5th round tight end if you can make it work. You don't usually see Kincaid fall to 53 anymore. You don't usually see Zay Flowers at 44 anymore. But those are nice little values that really make the top of this wide receiver build strong. Kincaid is a nice tight end. And then I was still able to go Kenneth Walker, Mostert, Chase Brown, Tyjae Spears, Kendre Miller. So this is a build where I feel so solid that it, like idealistically and structurally, it went the way that I wanted it to. I feel so solid at each of the positions that I was like, you know what? I'm going to do the upside QB thing. It feels a little bit like a wasted pick, but I don't even have Justin Fields stacked on this team. I do have Ayuk. So I knew I had a San Fran player where I did this, where I was like, well, I mean, Justin Fields could run for a bunch of long touchdowns and start to help make that week 17 game shoot out a little bit. The idea with Fields is you can't bank on any games played, but anytime he is playing, he does provide legitimate 30-point fantasy ceiling because he's an elite rushing quarterback. It's very possible that he can be even better than Joe Burrow, who I took at pick 77. And certainly when I'm taking Daniel Jones and not certain that Daniel Jones is going to be even active in the late part of the season, it's helpful to have a third QB, some more outs for QB scoring upside. The Burrow pick stacks with Chase and has Chase Brown. There is no Denver bringback. I need to get my bringbacks in order in the next batch of drafts. Daniel Jones stacks with Wan'Dale Robinson. There's no Colts bringback because why would there be? Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale. So I made this a double stack. And now my queue right now is full of wide receivers where I'm saying, Hoosier says I can't bring myself to click Fields. I want to so badly, though. I can't either. I have with Sean. And this is the only time I did it. And it was like, you know what? This has to be the situation where you do it. I do think there's logic to, like, he has legit weekly QB upside in a way that is, very, very strong and matters, right? So I finally did pick it or click his name on this one and try to build some of that into this team. I am going to stay at the 5 running backs because I really feel good about Kendre Miller and the rest of this back end of this running back build. But I don't know that I need an 8th receiver still. Like, this could be a 7 running back. 7 wide receiver build with Chase, Ayuk, Neighbors, Flowers, Rice, and then it's Legette, Wan'Dale. I guess I'm throwing another receiver. Oh, I could do a third tight end, Kincaid, Musgrave. A 3-5-7-3. Jelani Woods has been getting some hype, and his ADP has been climbing a little bit. And he also gives me a bring back on my New York Giants double stack. I have a Daniel Jones, Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson thing. I could have Kincaid, Musgrave, and Jelani Woods. Or I could take like a DJ Chark, Rondale Moore, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Tolbert. None of those guys complete these stacks in a key way. There's no Denver option unless I go to like... Is Greg Dulcich? Does he get drafted? Did he get drafted? Oh, Dulcich gets drafted? Yeah, he went in the 18th round in this. Bindles just asked thoughts. Those are my thoughts. I'm not super into Dulcich after last year, but I could also, I can see at this price for sure taking the swing. They don't have a lot of depth in the passing game. It's Adam Troutman and him. They have Lucas Kroll. It's the same tight ends as last year, so why couldn't Dulcich be the guy? I just Sean Payton brought over Troutman from New Orleans, likes his guys, and played him a decent amount last year. It wouldn't be that surprising though if Dulcich is good enough, if he just became the tight end to have out of this passing game. They don't have a deep wide receiver room, right? So it's certainly possible. There are probably some. Is Josh Reynolds? Yeah, I could go Josh Reynolds. Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, Cortland Sutton. Bindle says he's drafted 29% of the time at BBM. I have not noticed him. I don't think I need a third tight end here, but I also don't think I need an eighth wide receiver in a massive way. And most of these wide receivers are kind of desperate plays. And I don't think I need a sixth running back. Chat says Josh Reynolds is definitely the number 2 in Denver. How much did he get? 4.245 fully guaranteed, $9 million over 2 years. It's not a bad contract. I had starred all these wide receivers thinking this pick would be an eighth receiver, and I didn't really have a strong preference. And I'm looking at, I'm doing my research here and looking at the bringbacks. I could do Jelani Woods for a bringback, or I can do Josh Reynolds as a bringback on Burrow, Chase Brown, and Jamar Chase. And I did just notice that I have 3 of my 7 receivers do have a week 11 bye, which isn't the most important thing, but I think Kincaid Musgrave is a fine 2 tight end build. I don't need Jelani Woods. Josh Reynolds did get a little bit of guaranteed money and probably plays a certain type of role for them, whereas I think Mims and Franklin kind of play the same role. That's been kind of my concern with those 2 guys. And I'm kind of into Bo Nix. So we're going to take Josh Reynolds here as the right bring back to finish this build. I don't know how to change the name. I always rename, but I'm always doing it in my phone. I'll have to go in later and rename this. That one is done. All right, 5 more picks to make, then we'll get out of here. This one's also going to be done here. 1805. All right. The guy I have in the queue is Tank Bigsby. All right. So it's a 2582 here. Jaden Daniels and Justin Herbert. This one I think I do have stacked up reasonably well. I have Brian Robinson and Terry McLaurin and Ben Sinnott. And then Washington's bringback is Atlanta, and I have Bijan. And then this one I have Justin Herbert and Joshua Palmer, and I got Demario Douglas. And so both the other guys were gone, but I settled for Douglas. I was okay with it because I was trying to build in some correlation. This is the other spot where I grabbed Tolbert as well. But I do have little bringbacks on these teams. So this one also has Kamani Vidal. So both of these stacks have the running back included. So it's Jaden Daniels and Justin Herbert, Bijan Robinson, DeAndre Swift, Brian Robinson, Kamani Vidal, and Bucky Irving, Chris Olave, Devonta Smith, Terry McLaurin, Hollywood Brown, Jackson Smith and Jigba. It actually says Hollywood Brown now. Did he legally change his name? That's awesome. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Joshua Palmer, Demario Douglas, and Jalen Tolbert are my 8 receivers there. Trey McBride and Ben Sinnott. I don't have to do anything correlated with my stacks, but I mean, I could, but I don't have to. I can't do another Atlanta running. I think so. I have Tank Bigsby in the queue because I think the 6th running back's probably the move. Although I have Daniels and Herbert. This is another one where so Fields already went, but you could argue for a 3rd quarterback here too, because like Daniels maybe gets banged up a little. Herbert maybe not the most ceiling at QB, and maybe can't carry it by himself. The 5 running backs are Bijan Robinson, DeAndre Swift, who you're drafting to be the main guy if you're drafting him, Brian Robinson, and then Kamani Vidal and Bucky Irving are 2 really good upside rookies. That's probably still needs one more running back. Olave, Devonta Smith, McLaurin, Brown, JSN, Palmer, Douglas, and Tolbert is a fine 8 receivers. I don't need to just throw on another Tolbert-level receiver onto this build. Although DJ Chark is there. Why did I take Tolbert over DJ Chark on a Herbert team? I've been taking so much Chark late. Just throw him on there with Joshua Palmer and bet against Quentin Johnston. Trey McBride and Sinnott is probably fine at tight end. There's no other bring back there. There's no other bring back. Chat mentioned Kendrick Bourne. He could be another New England play on this. Juju supposed to be ready for the season. That's funny. I'm not taking Juju. We got the chat saying he's been in Hollywood for a minute, only a couple of days. Underdog updated names 3 days ago. Changed Marquise to Hollywood. Remove the junior from Marv, BTJ, and Tyrone Tracy. Nice. Hate the juniors. They confuse everything. I mean, I guess the decision here is, do I need a 6th running back with Bijan, Swift, Robinson, Vidal, and Irving? Oh, God. I just realized who the pick should be here. My concern a little bit is Vidal and Irving might not play a ton, and then I really only have 3 guys. There's a late round veteran that's going to play. I'm pretty confident. And I don't think is any good, but probably shouldn't be going in the 18th round. And it's Alexander Madison. I don't like Alexander Madison, but he doesn't even go drafted in some of these. And I do have Olave, so now you get the Olave New Orleans Vegas thing. What if Alexander Madison is the guy you need? No, I mean, that's not even a story you can tell yourself. If Alexander Madison's playing in week 17, that game's not shooting out. Right? It doesn't work that way. Alexander Madison's the pick you make, not to shoot out Chris Olave. It's the pick. I don't know. I don't know when you make that pick, but he's probably playing. David's no, take Dylan Lobby. It's fair. I'm going to make this a 2-5-9-2. I do like the receivers, and I do think the running backs are too thin, and probably the quarterbacks are a little thin, arguably. But I feel like adding DJ Chark to this. Oh, Derek Carr's there? I have Olave. I can just do a Carr Olave stack. Yeah, I am going to do a 3rd QB now. I changed my mind. Derek Carr is. I mean, it gives me a 3rd stacked quarterback. He's a very stable player. If I'm worried about Herbert actually throwing enough in some games and Daniels being healthy for all 17 games, Derek Carr's 10 picks behind ADP. I get him with my last pick to stack up with my wide receiver 1, who I took in the second round. Yeah, he brings something to this build. And then I didn't have to take Alexander Madison. I correlated Olave in a smart way instead of in a dumb way. All right, 2-3-6-2 for this build. We're at the 14-15 turn. We have Caleb Williams, Justin Herbert. Let's see what we did with those stacks. Caleb has Keenan and has JSN as a bring back. Herbert has Ladd McConkey. Does not have a bring back yet, but you can get that late. I could actually have bring backs on both my quarterbacks on this team. In fact, you could get that now, potentially. Javon Baker, Demario Douglas. So Jalen Polk must have just went in the last little bit. He did in this round. So maybe those aren't the picks yet, because those guys both, Baker and Douglas, have 185 ADPs. I'm back up at 192. All right, Caleb, Herbert, FF2. Not taking more running backs here, LOL. Yeah, I mean, you must be new. You must be new around here. Caleb, Justin Herbert, Tyjae Spears, Marshawn Lloyd, and Kendre Miller. That looks like, the perfect hyper-fragile build. All I need is Tyjae Spears, Marshawn Lloyd, and Kendre Miller. Tyreek Hill, Nico Collins, and Malik Neighbors, Keenan Allen, Ladd McConkey, and JSN, and then Dalton Kincaid and David Njoku. Fine, I'll draft a running back. Bucky Irving again. He's just mispriced. I'm not going to take him at the percentage that I have in this cycle through the whole summer, because I'm highly confident he won't be going 168 in August. It's just mispriced. He's the clear number 2, and Rachaad White's not a very good number 1, and everyone's going to be telling you that in August. The camp reports are going to be that he's the clear number 2. This team would be great on DK. I mean, it's going to be great on Underdog too. Don't worry. The question here is, do I also take like a Tyrone Tracy? I think you could justify taking J.K. Dobbins here. Sean got me a little bit more into him. If I'm taking Vidal so much, I mean, it's really just like you have to make the cheap bets on the Chargers backfield. They're going to run so much. They drafted a bunch of offensive linemen, and Gus Edwards is probably not the right guy to like have the real ceiling. That's a small hit kind of player there too. The top 6 receivers here are flawless. They're fantastic. Tyreek Hill, Nico Collins, Malik Neighbors, Keenan Allen is a great first 4. Ladd McConkey is a little bit flawed, if you will. He goes a little bit behind ADP. I grabbed some exposure to him and then paired him with Herbert. So you get the Herbert McConkey stack. So, when I say flawless, at least he's stacked. And then JSN behind that. Really like that build. Kincaid and Njoku is great at tight end. And I like the 0 RB build so far. J.K. Dobbins could make sense to add to my stack. Tyrone Tracy is probably the in a vacuum pick for me at running back, because I'll keep taking that shot. But Tracy's ADP is almost as high as Javon Baker's, who is the bring back that I'm talking about kind of needing on this build as my wide receiver 7. Even J.K. Dobbins has a 175. Baker's at 184. I mean, that's a little bit different, but Dobbins could fall to the next turn too. I don't really care if I get Tracy or Dobbins or Herbert or Roshan Johnson, who could both go with Caleb Williams, actually. Look at that. So I now feel like I have plenty of running back paths on this build. So I'm going to take Baker. I'm just going to lock up Baker and make sure that I get it took him 15 picks ahead of ADP, but make sure I get a New England receiver as a bring back on this Chargers thing. I think it makes sense to get that figured out. Sorry, I got to think a little bit more in these late rounds. I think part of the reason I haven't had as many bringbacks and stacks as I've been wanting is I've been doing these on stream and maybe not actually, making sure I'm not missing something in some of the cases. All right, 2-5-6-2 for the next one. We got 3 more drafts. We're almost done here. Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa. A-Rod asks, do you like Baker over Douglas? I do think you want to make the swing on the rookie upside. I liked Douglas earlier. That was my initial thought. I think you want to make the swing on the rookies over Douglas, especially when you're doing the stack type stuff like this. And basically, anytime I'm taking New England, it's because I'm stacking up May or I'm stacking up as a bringback because of their more vertical profile. It's like if they hit, they're helping to shoot that game out, that Chargers game. That's what we're looking for. And then the flip side of that is if you're stacking them with May, those vertical receivers hitting is really good for May in a full season sense. That means we're talking very positively about how May's playing. Douglas is the kind of guy that's just eating up a lot of volume out of the slot when other things aren't necessarily going well. Like he had a great year last year in terms of targets per out run and all that stuff, largely because who else could earn targets? And I still think I think he's a little underrated, and I think he's a solid pick, and I picked him in the other draft. But I think the overall ceiling of Baker as an unknown rookie is something to swing at a little bit in these correlated situations. Also liked his prospect profile, so I want to get some exposure to him too. And I had Douglas in that other one, kind of willing to balance it. Part of it for me is I took a lot of Douglas in the pre-draft in my big board stuff, and so I'm kind of balancing that out now by saying I'm just going to do what ADP says and take Baker. I've taken Polk some. Basically, don't have a strong opinion is the other way of putting it. I'm taking some of each of them. All right, 2-5-6-2. Trevor Lawrence, Tua, Kyron, Kenneth Walker, Marshawn Lloyd, J.K. Dobbins, and Roschon Johnson. So this is one where I did take Dobbins. Not stacked or anything, just took him. CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, Christian Kirk, Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, and Jerry Jeudy. We have Njoku and Bowers as the tight ends. And so I don't have a Tennessee bring back, but I do have Lawrence with Christian Kirk. It is hard to get a bring back from Tennessee. And then for Miami, I have Waddle. I have Njoku as a bring back. Yeah, I did something right. That's what's up. And Jeudy. Look at that. I have 2 bringbacks. Njoku and Jeudy. This is the one where I ended up getting Tua. I was actually setting up a Cleveland thing with Waddle as the bringback, but I got Tua 25 picks behind ADP. And so I got Lawrence and Tua, who I had taken Lawrence and passed on Tua at the pick 119, and then Tua comes all the way back to 143. 5 pretty good running backs, only 6 receivers. 2 of them are KC, and actually 3 have the week 6 bye. I mean, I got to be looking at receiver in this stage, although I don't think both of these picks have to be receiver. Tight end's fine. Kyron, Kenneth Walker, Marshawn Lloyd, J.K. Dobbins, and Roschon Johnson. It's probably a fine 5 running back build, but I could add there. Trevor Lawrence and Tua, I have to be okay with. That's a lot of capital. I got to add at receiver. I mean, this might be an 18th round Treylon Burks pick, even though you guys hate me for that with the Trevor Lawrence stuff. Because I think I need to get to 9 receivers here. Lamb, Waddle, Kirk, Xavier Worthy, and Hollywood Brown is actually a really good top 5. OBJ, you're not getting me to take OBJ, buddy. Miami's a little too concentrated, I think, for that. I'm going to take Wandale here. He's pretty clearly the top pick by ADP. I don't have him correlated or anything, but I still think there's a good chance that we haven't seen the best of him yet, or at least some chance that we haven't seen the best of him yet. He's been dealing with some injuries and stuff the last couple of years and just a bad situation. If Malik Neighbors can help that passing game, Wandale, I think, can be I mean, I get him 15 picks behind ADP is really the reason I took him, but I think he can be a useful piece on builds like this. Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky one. I don't really know how I want to close this one out, frankly. I feel kind of okay at each position, but also not great at each position. All right. Jumping over to a puppy. This one's only in the 14th round. 2, 4, 5, 2. Jaden Daniels and Tua. Achane, Chase Brown, Zach Charbonnet, Kendre Miller, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Terry McLaurin, Keon Coleman, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Trey McBride and David Njoku. What is up, Fantasy Football Garage? By the way, guys, just thought of it. Go like the video. Go subscribe. Go do all the things that you're supposed to do. Let's check the subscribers. 955. We only got 5 subscribers. I've been on here for 2 hours and 45 minutes. I need 45 subscribers to hit that 1K. I mentioned this. I'm getting on a flight Sunday. I'm flying out of town. I won't be streaming Sunday to Tuesday. I might come back tomorrow morning. Depends if I get everything else I need to get done before I go on that flight, to do one more stream before we go bye-bye out of town. But yeah, I'm hoping to get to that 1,000 subscriber mark as soon as possible, maybe by the end of the weekend. So let's hope we can get there. All right. This is a 2-4-5-2. Only 5 receivers through 13 rounds. Pretty thin. Tyreek, Diggs, McLaurin, Keon Coleman, and JSN. The stacks are there. It's a Jaden Daniels, Tua that has Tyreek and McLaurin. The Atlanta bringback isn't there. And the Cleveland bringback isn't. Oh, yeah, and Njoku's there. So it's a Tua, Achane, Tyreek with an Njoku bringback. And then a Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin with no Atlanta bringback yet. Top guy in the queue plays for Atlanta, but he's a quarterback. Kirk Cousins is 30 picks past ADP here. Ben Sinnott is the top non-QB. He obviously correlates, but I have McBride and Njoku. Could still do that. But I only have 5 receivers, man. This is not good to put yourself in this position. We're going to throw Luke McCaffrey onto this build, I think. Although I start getting into bye week issues with week 14, but McCaffrey does fit with Jaden Daniels, makes it a little double stack through wide receivers, McLaurin and McCaffrey. Wandale. I'm back up in 5 picks. I probably just got to go receiver again. But it's a decent little running back area, too. I don't know where I'll go there. We'll find that out later. All right. The eliminator, I have Demarcus Robinson as the only guy in my queue. Because in the eliminator, you can be a little more unstacked. I took Stafford as a back stack option. I have Jalen Hurts as my lead queue here. This is a 2-3-6-2. Hurts and Stafford, Warren, Javonte Williams, and Kendre Miller, Tyreek Hill, Nico Collins, Christian Kirk, Keenan Allen, JSN, and Joshua Palmer, Evan Ingram, and Dallas Goedert at tight end. I'm going to stick to a 2 tight end build there. I have been toying with more 3 QB builds in the eliminator than, I was letting on, I guess, early. I know, when I start talking about the 2 builds, there's a lot of concern about taking zeros. My case has been that you can fairly easily take zeros at running back and wide receiver as well. And also, you're not just looking for floor. You're looking to be right in some ways. So what I have here is I do have Hurts stacked up with Goddard, but no one else. I have Stafford unstacked, and that's why I have Demarcus Robinson there. His ADP is 190, but he goes higher in some rooms. and I would need him to come back to 191, or else I have to take him at 170. That's exhausting. I don't think Stafford necessarily has to be stacked in the eliminator, but I'd like him to be. I only have 3 running backs. That seems bad. Bucky Irving's a reach here, but I don't have a single player on my entire roster that otherwise has a week 11 bye. And I like Bucky Irving quite a lot. So he makes a lot of sense to add into this eliminator build. All right, last one, Best Ball Mania. Oh, this is the one where I just took Wan'Dale Robinson a few moments ago and threw Treylon Burks into my queue as my potential round 18 pick. We just talked about this team. It's the Kyron, Kenneth Walker, Marshawn Lloyd, J.K. Dobbins, Roschon Johnson team. It's the Trevor Lawrence, Tua team. They're both stacked. Tua's got the Njoku bring back. I was going to do Burks and 18 to bring back on the Jacksonville stuff, which means this would be probably a running back 6. All I have is Kyron, Kenneth Walker, and Lloyd to really count on, and then it's Dobbins and Roschon late. And this is a Trevor Lawrence Kirk build where I am going to take Tank Bigsby on this one. I think you guys made some good points, and I don't love taking Bigsby everywhere. Throwing him on a Jacksonville build and saying, hey, look, Etienne got hurt, so they had to throw a ton, and that's why Trevor Lawrence was the right QB this year. I think it makes sense. It's correlated. I like getting the backup running backs on the quarterback plays sometimes, where it's like the correlated element is that starting running back gets hurt, team goes pass heavier than they expected to. Backup running back's playing, so he's still valuable even though they're not running as much. Everybody wins on my roster if that happens. Unless Bigsby's bad, which you guys have pointed out is a concern. That's all the picks that I have to make here. Like I said, I might come back tomorrow. I'm not 100% sure on that. If not, I won't be back on Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday because I will be out of town. I'm not going to bring equipment to pod from there. Possible that I try to do some drafts from out of state, like some fast drafts and some fun recordings and stuff later in the summer, but not going to worry about that at this point while I'm sort of just building up the channel. Appreciate all you guys. Appreciate all the support. Thanks for hanging out. Make sure you go like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you go, I got a ticker. Sign up for my newsletter at www.bengretch.substack.com. There's a free newsletter there you can sign up for. Some of the stuff's going to wind up being behind the paywall, but if you sign up for the free newsletter, I had some questions about this with the Eliminator article, for example. I don't know how it actually works and what you guys can see, but I think if you go there now and you're not signed up for anything, you can't always see the free preview. But if you are subscribed to the free newsletter, I can put where the paywall is on the post, and I always put them in there for the people who actually subscribe. But on the Eliminator, for example, I did a big chunk of the write-up outside the paywall. So you guys would have been able to read through several of the key points. And then, if you don't want to pay, if you want to do it on the freeway, that's my pitch for why it's still worthwhile to be subscribed to the free version of the newsletter at www.bengretch.substack.com. Appreciate you guys. We got with you on Treylon. Still has upside. If he earns a role, it just might be early. I like it. And appreciate this as well. Safe travels. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Fun Friday. Get those notifications on in case I do come back tomorrow morning. Again, not 100% sure on whether I'm going to be able to fit that in before my daughter's soccer practice. And then after the soccer practice, we're going over to my mom's house tomorrow. So it would be in the morning tomorrow. We will see whether I can get the okay from the boss at my house, my wife. But thank you guys for hanging out. And we will either talk to you tomorrow, or if not, it'll be like next Wednesday, and I'll have a bunch of new drafts. Take it easy.